Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our work session, today being May 21st, 2026. Appreciate you all being here. We are going to jump right down to roll call of board members, please. Madam Clerk. Sorry.
Ms. Bryant,
Present.
Ms. Burns,
Here.
Ms. Cooper,
Here.
Ms. Dooley,
Here.
Mr. Meyer,
Here.
Ms. Richardson,
Here.
Ms. Torres.
Here.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you. I know, and I just, for clarification, we did move and approve Ms. Richardson's remote participation in our closed meeting. Do we need to do that again? Okay, so if we,
I
If
move
I-
to allow Ms. Richardson to participate in our work session remotely due to personal illness. Having provided prior notification to the board clerk and the board chair, she will join the proceedings electronically via Zoom from a private residence in Charlottesville, Virginia.
need a second, please?
Second.
Second from Ms. Cooper. All in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Great, thank you. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Richardson. We have roll call, and now I need a motion for approval of our agenda, please.
Move to approve our proposed agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Dooley. May I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Any questions, discussion? All in favor, please say yes.
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 Any opposed? Great, thank you. Now we are moving to comments from members of the community. So we do have up at the podium, if you're interested in making public comment, you are have 3 minutes if you will clearly state your name and your address. Come on up, thank you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Everest Kester, and as of yesterday, I am a proud graduate of CHS. Thank you. During my time here, I was president of Green Bacon, the environmental club, and the Green Team Alliance, which is a group of local high school environmental clubs supported by the Community Climate Collaborative. This year, the Green Team Alliance has been working on a cohesive approach to recycling and composting programs in city and county high schools. All of the environmental clubs in the area have identified problems with recycling and composting systems in the Albemarle County and Charlottesville City public schools, including inconsistent management, poor communication, and high contamination. At CHS, Green Bacon manages the entire recycling program. Our club meets 1 hour once a week, and about half of this time is dedicated to taking out the recycling. Students have had to sort through moldy food waste, mysterious liquids, and lots of trash in order to have a recycling system for the school. We've had to, at times, discard entire bins because of the extent of contamination. And our composting program is available only to kitchen staff, limiting its effectiveness in reducing waste. Despite these challenges, we believe that it's very important to have these programs, and students have spent a long time to create and maintain these programs. That being said, students have little success in addressing the challenges at the individual school level, so we are coming to you to work on a universal solution. The petition that we have presented to you, or will present to you, outlines 6 concrete methods for improving recycling and composting systems in all the Charlottesville and Albemarle schools. We are asking you to adopt a paper and metal only approach to recycling and ensure that every classroom has a clearly labeled recycling bin. We are asking you to introduce paper towel composting in bathrooms and food composting during lunch periods. We're asking you to increase education efforts around recycling and composting and clearly communicate changes to waste management systems to the community. Finally, we are asking you to facilitate a gradual transition towards school staff managing recycling and composting systems so that student environmental clubs can focus on education efforts and other issues. It's absolutely essential for staff to be fairly compensated for this increased responsibility to ensure that they are incentivized to properly manage these waste systems. The Green Teen Alliance's petition was signed by 285 students, school staff, parents, and community members, as well as local organizations. Around 60% of signatures came from students, 11% from school staff, and 12% from parents. Clearly, the community is invested and interested in seeing those programs carried out. We believe that positive environmental action only works if it is carried out collaboratively, so we want to work alongside county and city schools divisions to implement meaningful change. We understand that this may be a long, complicated process, but the Green Teen Alliance and high school environmental clubs are happy to share our experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. If you want to leave with the clerk, thank you so much. All right, next up, we have Sarah Delgado.
Hi, all. My name is Sarah Delgado. I don't have a student in Charlottesville schools this year, but I did last year. And I work at the Community Climate Collaborative. I do youth and outreach work there. And working with local high schoolers and youth in the city and the county these past several years, I've had a myriad of students, activists reach out to me asking about composting and recycling in schools, in their communities, in their neighborhoods. And we've tried to help send them places to get assistance. And the city's been great about supporting so many sustainability initiatives. And I know that the city is working really hard to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and, do a lot of different projects to help green the earth. But when it comes to schools, I'm trying to listen to the students. Yes, C3 supports the Green Teen Alliance, but when we asked all of the students from all of the different schools, public, private, in the Charlottesville-Albemarle area, their number one complaint, concern, issue was just consistent recycling and composting from kindergarten through 12th grade. It is challenging for us to keep trash out of the landfill, out of the recycling, out of the composting, especially when it's not consistent and educated from kindergarten through senior year. So we're asking for consistency. We're asking for your collaboration and cooperation. We know that there's a lot of different facilities that manage these things. There's the sustainability department, the school, maybe child nutrition, waste management. But if staff, admin, and other folks don't know how to recycle and compost effectively in city schools, then the students really aren't either. So I really encourage you to read through this letter. The students have spent a lot of time, research, personal experience digging through, trash and reaching out to the composting folks locally, business owners, and setting up meetings with local community leaders. Yeah, we're asking for help. The students have some great initiatives going on. There are some schools where it's happening and it's great, and there are teachers and students that are really embracing it. But if it's only one class here and there, then it's not going to be, supporting the entire student community. So yes, really encourage you to listen to the students and support them in their initiatives. And this is really important to them. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Horn.
Hi, I think I'm out of turn, but here I go. First, thank you so much for a great graduation. It's a team effort. Your speech was wonderful, Dr. Gurley, and it was a beautiful night last night. Thank you. Following are some thoughts before your policy conversation. Regarding the policy section on community involvement in decision-making. I assume that you include CCS teachers and students in this community. If so, please know that the talk to your teachers and talk to your students, please request is still out there and needed. An example, and I promise this will be the last time I talk about it, I think, is grading. I attended the grading committee meeting last week, and though I truly appreciated the invite, it seemed like the discussion was disjointed. And this is not due to any of the members being unqualified or less than brilliant. I respect everyone who was in that room. No, it was because our current equitable grading and standards-based grading for all doesn't make sense. CMS and CCS teachers and students have been talking over the past few years about what might make more sense. I have heard some really good ideas. Please involve this community. Next, mental wellness in an active academic environment, one of your policy moments. Okay, here begins the big fight that I will be in the ring with forever. Your policy document talks about mental wellness without mentioning screens. This is a mistake. We need screen-free classrooms. My own screen-free classroom has worked really well, but you don't have to take my word for it. This is the book. The Digital Delusion by Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath from Harvard. It is a detailed and well-researched argument for minimizing screen use in education. It debunks ed tech's progressive claims and vividly captures the harm that's being done to our kids via screen learning. If you can't get a copy of this book, I will buy it for you. I will hold book clubs at my house and provide pastries for Mary Beth and fresh coffee. I will hold a fundraiser to get Dr. Horvath to come here for our PD in August. For now, I'll leave you with a quote from the book. The book's opening line is, "This might be one of the hardest truths our generation has to face, but better to confront it now than to keep pretending it isn't so." Our children are less cognitively capable than we were at their age. That's the first time in human history that is the fact, and our children deserve better. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Horn. We have Reed Schroback.
Members of the school board, my name is Reed Kroback, and I'm a junior at Community Lab School in Albemarle County. I'm a member of the Green Teen Alliance, and I strongly support the petition to improve recycling and composting in all of the Charlottesville and Albemarle schools. Over the past few weeks, I've dug damp paper towels and half-eaten food out of recycling bins and removed plastic bags and glass bottles from compost bins at my school. Students at other area high schools face similar challenges, often at a much larger scale. It should not be students' responsibility to take time out of their busy days to manage recycling and composting systems. Additionally, myself and other students have given dozens of presentations and put up countless posters over the last few years promoting better recycling and composting practices. We've talked with teachers and raised the issue to school administrators, yet none of our efforts have been successful, largely due to the lack of consistency in waste management systems across schools. By adopting the universal recycling and composting systems outlined in the petition, as well as increasing education efforts around these, you can help solve this problem. Efficient universal recycling and composting systems managed by school staff will significantly lessen the unfair burden placed on uncompensated student environmental clubs. Consistent and clear communication to students, school staff, and the broader community about what can and cannot be recycled and composted, as well as the importance of both of these systems, will help address the high contamination rates seen today, making these systems easier to manage. Though I am not a city student, it is very important to me that both Charlottesville and Albemarle adopt better waste management systems. As noted in the petition, environmental action is only effective if it is carried out collaboratively. The Charlottesville and Albemarle school systems are well suited to collaborate together and with the Green Teen Alliance to work on improving recycling and composting systems in order to work towards a healthier planet for current and future generations. My generation will inherit a world shaped by the environmental decisions made by today's leaders, including you all. It is essential that these decisions keep student perspectives in mind in order to ensure long-term sustainability. The nearly 300 signatures on the petition highlight the broad support for this initiative among students, school staff, community members, and local organizations. Please review the petition and add a discussion of it to the June 4th meeting agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Willa.
Hi, my name is Willa, and I just graduated from Community Lab in Albemarle County. So although I'm not a city student, thank you. Although I'm not a city student, I agree with everything Reed said, that the city and the county can work together, and that's really important. And I think it matters a lot that we're not just like separated. And I mean, it's kind of hard to separate when there are so many schools overlapping with Charlottesville. And I've also helped at lab with the compost, and I must say it's quite an experience digging through food with thin latex gloves, and you can feel everything. So I just think it's really important that we find other resources, or we use other resources to help students, so they're not only dealing with this and trying to figure it out, but also so they still have time in their day. Because I remember when I was doing it, it was every Friday for like the last 30-45 minutes of my last block, and that took away a lot of time from my school period. So I support this recycling and composting.
Thank you. And then I can't read the first name. Miss O'Flynn, sorry.
Sive O'Flynn. I'm also with the Community Climate Collaborative. Obviously, I'm here in support of the Green Teen Alliance and the request that they're making to get some, I mean, essentially, I think what you're hearing is that they're asking you to support them in something that they have been fighting tooth and nail to get their own schools, you know, like they're asking who is in charge of this? How can we get support? How can we make this happen in our school? Then they talk to another school. That other school says, we're having exactly the same type of problem in this way. There's just no consistency. There's no support. It's left up to these teenagers to, you know, I mean, as they're saying, take time from their busy day. I know we want to empower students to do good work, but this is waste management. This is a municipal issue. This is like an issue that should not be something that these students are trying to figure out year by year, semester by semester. How are we going to deal with this year? How are we going to get buy-in from other students? This should be for custodial staff to be paid correctly, trained well, and upskilled to do this waste management. I think it's just as simple as that. And they're asking for your support, your direction to the various schools in the system to do that. We often talk about wanting to empower students, wanting students to, you know, stand up for themselves, get involved. I feel like often that's done just like, and we see them do it and we're like, okay, cool, they did it. But are we actually listening to the issues that they're bringing to our attention? This is a very practical issue. This is a very real world issue. So it should be, you know, for your consideration. You do have capacity to direct schools to investigate it, to come up with pathways. Collaboration would be excellent, as they've pointed out. They're collaborating with each other across schools. It's phenomenal to watch, but it's also phenomenal to listen and actually learn from what they have highlighted as issues. So I hope you'll put this on the June 4th agenda. Pivoting, as Jen Horn was just talking about with the screens today at the CMS showcase, there's a showcase, I'm not sure how many people are aware of it. It was really fantastic. Middle schoolers were over at Jefferson School talking about problems that they had identified in the community and then suggesting some solutions. There were three kind of, you know, maybe 14-year-old boys who were talking about their problem they had identified was there's no third space type thing, no place for them to just like be around each other, engage in activities. They were talking about all of them, three teenage boys were talking to me, a stranger, about their emotions, how they feel addicted to their phones. They can't put them down. They want support to put their phones down. They directly said that to me. They said that they are feeling lonely when they're sitting in a group of their friends and all they're doing is looking at their phones. They spoke of it as an addiction. So they need to be supported in that, and they're asking for that too. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else here in the media center? We didn't have anybody else signed up. All right, and I don't think we had anybody online signed up. All right, thank you. Thank you for your comments. We did, just quickly, we did respond to emails I think that you all sent, and if we have follow-up, we'll do that again. Thank you. All right, and then we are moving on to the consent agenda.
I would like to move that we adopt our consent agenda with the revised personnel recommendations.
Second?
So we got the first and the second. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Yes. I'd like to abstain.
And one abstention from Ms. Bryant. All right, thank you. And now we will move on to our items for discussion, our policy work.
All right. Good evening. Good evening, board members and anyone, and Ms. Horn, Dr. Trotter, those assembled in the audience. This evening, we will have a work session directly related to some policies. And I will take us through those policies and hopefully we'll have some dialogue. Next slide, please. So we had originally posted a presentation for you all, and then we had on yesterday a work session with VSBA as it relates to policies. And so we updated our presentation to incorporate several slides from VSBA following that training that was attended on yesterday. During this thorough and detailed session, they provided guidance to school divisions on the distinctions between policies and regulations. As outlined on this slide, policies are formal statements adopted by the school board that reflect legal requirements as well as the values of our community. Policies are binding, enforceable, and serve as an accountability tool. What policies do not cover are the administrative functions, the day-to-day procedures, the step-by-step processes, those operational details that are typically found in regulations, procedures, and handbooks, rather than in board policies. So I just want to, the first couple of slides will just kind of shape what are we trying to accomplish on this evening to really center and maximize your time here and really set the stage for the outcomes, because I really believe that what's gathered us here tonight is we want greater outcomes for our students. We want to ensure that we have accountability measures. So these first couple of slides will set the stage for that, and then I'll introduce our policies we're looking at. Next slide. So as we embark upon this very important work this evening, it's important that we clearly understand the respective roles related to policy, governance, and implementation, as well as the factors that can increase risk for school boards. So our job is to make sure we set you up for success. When we look at the role of the school board, your responsibility is to establish policies, set expectations, provide governance, and oversee the implementation of those policies. On the staff side, our responsibility is to implement those policies through the day-to-day operational rules found in handbooks, regulations, procedures, and to consistently enforce those expectations. As outlined through the training yesterday, several factors can increase risk for school boards. These include policies that contain too much operational detail, policies with incorrect or unclear language, and policies that are not sufficiently specific. Risks also increase when school board members become personally involved in administrative decision-making rather than policy implementation, and when there's interference with the administrative ability to develop policies and procedures and operational guidance. Additional concerns arise when policies are not clearly communicated and when policies and regulations are not applied consistently. I know that we've spent a significant amount of time discussing the importance of both policies and regulations, and I know that that remains a critical component of our work. Next slide. Because some of our topics this evening relate to certain practices and are implemented within our school division, it's important that we use this slide to kind of balance the two, what is policy and what's regulation. Our policies outline what will happen while our regulations provide the day-to-day. As you know, the school board is responsible for establishing policies, which I said on the previous slide, while the regulations are implemented and they're carried out by myself and the staff. As I mentioned earlier, those policy governances are you all, while the regulations bring those policies to life operationally. And although not every policy, and I think this is really important for us as we think about the work we want to accomplish this evening, although not every policy requires a corresponding regulation, in many cases, it's helpful that the regulations are clearly specific. In many cases, it is helpful to have regulations that clearly specify the procedures and details for implementation. And that is a lot of how we got here, like the how part. So on the next slide, where we will end with from the training, the last component from the training yesterday was that what we want to present for your consideration as we work through tonight's topics is the issue centered on legal compliance, values, goals, and expectations. So as we think about each one of the policies that we move through, is it about compliance, values, goals, and expectations? If so, it should be addressed through a policy. As we reflect on these issues, many of the matters that are important to you, they already are in policy. So everything we were talking about this evening is already in policy. So what about the policy? So what about that policy, the existing policy, is not working? So then the question becomes, which component of the policy do you need to modify? And how do we ensure those changes remain aligned to state code and legal precedent, right? So as we move through this, everything we're talking about today is already in policy. So what do we need to modify about the current policy? And so I'll keep reminding them, what are we modifying? And then are we remaining in alignment with code and legal precedent? Conversely, the topics being discussed are focused on methods, procedures, and how implementation occurs. If we are only having conversations about operational matters, then we need to move away from like spending a lot of time here. And I think that what I would ask as we can still talk about the topic, but what you'll hear me ask is, what do we hope to achieve? What do we want to see as an outcome? Because that's the work that then we will go back and do as a staff. Any questions before we start talking about the subsequent policies? All right, so let's get started with student services first. And a couple of us will walk you through that. It will be Ms. Rasnick, it'll be Ms. Powell, myself. So when we look at student services, we have a couple of policies here, and you'll see on the slide it deals with tobacco products and nicotine vape products, substance abuse assistance, and then we have an overall student services policy. You all have asked us to elevate this, and I know some of this was as a result of some recent incidents that have happened in the school. So I guess to get us started, what are we seeking to accomplish, And then what we can answer for you, and what we can do is we can bring up policy, we can cite things that we're already doing, because in some areas it may be a knowledge gap, which that was one of the areas that was a vulnerability, that sometimes is the information just, has it not been communicated correctly? Or does it need to be, the actual policy needs to be revised? Or is it just that the regulation and the implementation, and again, sometimes it's about gaps. So I will kick it off to you all. And I think the first thing is, I don't think everyone has to respond to it, but it really is about, what do you want to see accomplished here? Because we've brought it here for discussion, and I think, what would you like to see as an end result of this work? And then we can tell you what already exists, or we can decide whether the policy is sufficient enough.
Would it be possible, Ms. Thacker, can you bring up that policy, the JFCH, or do we have it linked somewhere else? Either or all three, yep.
Ms. Burns said, start with
GBEC.
GBEC.
It's all the same policy.
Oh, yeah.
They're linked. What is it, the difference?
JFCH.
You got to
Yeah.
bring the mic to you.
They're, because it addresses, it doesn't.
Pull it close. There we go.
Very uncomfortable for me. I'm a little short. Because it addresses students, staff, and visitors. There's multiple, so it's reflected in different sections of our policy manual. JFCH is the student, because student services is J. That's why it's like 3 different policy numbers or letters.
So if we're addressing students first, we'll pull up policy JFCH for review.
It's all the same.
All the same.
So I think, I don't know, who would like to start this? Ms. Cooper? No? Put you on the spot.
I mean, I can start us off to get us going, so we can, for this. So the reason why we're here, because the concern was about vapes. So what is it that you would like to see as a result of this work? And then we can tell you whether then we can make a decision. Does this policy meet the litmus test? Because everything beyond this is the work of the staff.
Right, and I guess then my thoughts on it would be, we have the policy. This would be the opportunity for the board to share their concerns or what our questions may be
Yes.
around whether there's anything that we're missing code or compliance wise, or what you all are doing on your end as far as like how, for me, I'll speak for me. So how much can we mandate students who are struggling with substance abuse or repeat vape offenses, that they go through some type of restorative training or some type of substance abuse counseling. I know we've talked about, I know you and I, Ms. Rasnick, were part of the student rights and responsibilities work, and we looked at that at another school division. So that's kind of where I'm coming at. So I acknowledge that we have the policy, but this is my opportunity to put my voice in that I think we need to be doing more, and how much can we do more? How much can we, how can we better support the students and the families, for them to be able to return to school and to break the cycle of just the damages that the substances within those vapes are doing to our students. So that's how I will kick this conversation off.
And for me, I think it was more of the educational component. We know that our students are struggling with this issue, and how do we create spaces to support them? I think that when you know someone is dealing with a substance abuse issue, suspending them is not, is not helping them, right? And so what are things that we can do or put in place that is put in place already that's supporting our students that is dealing with addictions?
Thank you. I think having a high schooler, I just want to acknowledge like this is near and dear to my heart, right? My child walks through these halls every day. And we regularly in the car have to talk about where she's going and what she's doing and what she might be exposed to. So there's a number of things that we implement in the different tiers of support for substance misuse. And that stretches across alcohol, tobacco, and illegal substances. Since our last presentation, kind of our third big presentation on this topic, we did implement our school mental health professionals are trained in a program called Brief Challenges. That is a brief intervention refer to treatment program. We have a number of preventative and instructional models through our health and PE and our student health advisory board. One of the things that we have been discussing with the student rights and responsibilities is being very clear about what happens the first time, the second time, the third time. To your question about what we can mandate, we cannot require someone to participate in treatment. We can require someone to participate in educational activities. So what we're working through, so Dr. Trotter is facilitating and working through the student rights and responsibilities, but making sure we're aligned with our health and wellness policies, our health services policies, is what is the education that needs to be provided the first time a student interacts with an administrator, because it is a violation of the student rights and responsibilities, right? Having a vape, whether it is tobacco or something else, having cigarettes, we don't see that very often, but it's a violation of the rights and responsibilities. But we're all educators. So what we're proposing is a tiered approach that the first time it happens, there's some intentional engagement with educational activities. And we have access to a number of resources, so it can be tailored to what the student was engaging with. That second time, that engagement is going to be for a longer duration with a greater amount of facilitation. And then the third time, longer duration, greater amount of facilitation. So what we can mandate is education. In kind of preparation for tonight, I did want to go through our student interactions with our school administrators in relation to this topic. And of the students in our school division who have violated the student rights and responsibilities in relation to this, we have 3 students who it has been more than one time. So without divulging anything about them, knowing that they are referred to and have the option to participate in treatment. And then I think the other piece that we can be really intentional about is something Ms. Richardson brought up at our last meeting, which was having some more like intentional family engagement around this topic, having maybe a guest speaker. But what I would also share is if parents are concerned about their child's use of substances, even if they are not getting caught at school with those devices, then we really want to hear from the parents, because we do have resources. We have 22 students who have accessed our Brief Challenges program this year. We have 7 students who were referred to SAP to access their intervention and refer to treatment program. We have 15 school mental health professionals trained to deliver it in our building. That's in addition to SAP. So parents might be worried first. And so if they can reach out to their school counselor through Parent Square, their cohort administrator, if they don't know who those staff members are, they can call Student Services at 245-2405, and we'll connect them with the counselor that can make a referral.
I have a question. You mentioned health and PE classes. So where some of this education's being done. My understanding is that after 10th grades or 11th, 12th grade, students aren't in health or PE anymore. So where are they getting that education from if they're not in health or PE?
Well, they all would have gone through. So the initial part, the universal part is every child would have will have at least have gone through it at least twice, right? So we are educating them as we onboard them. So it's the exposure to it. And then if these students, so subsequently 11th and 12th grade, as we engage with these families, a student gets caught with substance, whatever, we are then, their education piece would then come from one of our building level providers. So universally, we're not saying we have to wait for you to get caught, because as 9th and 10th graders, every child's getting the exposure. But beyond that, then you would be getting it from one of the 15 providers in the building.
Only if you were caught with something, though. You wouldn't have there would not be ongoing education and support. It would truly only be if you were caught with something at that point.
That education starts in elementary school. So it isn't just 9th and 10th grade. And we have a variety of different curriculums depending on the age that's appropriate and developmentally sound. That can be something that I work with Dr. Malone, the Health and Wellness Committee, and the student committees that are doing a lot of the healthy habits work. Because I mean, I think that's part of it too. It is built into the student work around healthy habits and treating your body with respect.
Yeah. And I think, as we talk about data, that, one of the things that we have to do too is in our data collection, one of the gaps that I think I recognize is that, we have families who are, like Ms. Cooper said, the principals hear me say, you can't suspend your way to a better culture. And so you can't suspend a child and think that, it's going to get different. And so we do offer, I don't think that we use the suspension as a way to get better results, but what we know is that we say, you can have 3 days out, or it can be 1 day out if you do the brief challenges. And then we're not keeping the data on the number of parents who are declining. And I think that that's what we need, because so often we speak very generally because we hear a phone call from this person or that person, we see this, but to be able to speak to the number overall isn't as high as we think. And in this smaller number, this is the number of families who we are offering brief challenges to, and we're trying to get the student back to the school, and the parent is saying, I don't want the service. So I think that that's a data point that we should be collecting moving forward.
I think some of the differentiation there, though, is we're giving the student who was caught vaping the same amount of time as the student who sold the vape to it's the same, where I think.
Not always.
Okay.
I think, I think that, I think you would have to do a little bit of digging so that we're not speaking generally about, because sometimes it's just based on students were vaping and it looked like the students all received the same thing. And sometimes it's the student received the same thing, but this student was not offered brief challenges. This student was offered. So on the surface, it looks like we all received the same thing, because we have to be mindful that parents only know what happened to their student.
I have a question.
Sure.
So I understand the distinction between policy and regulation. I guess in this case, I'm wondering a little bit more about the vape detectors, just so that, because I think it gets tricky to distinguish the two, especially between policy and regulation, when in this case, like, we want to be careful that we're not creating policies that would be disproportionate. And I think when it comes to vaping, if you have to get caught and there's not a lot of usage of vape detectors, then we could be creating a policy that is going to be not equitable across the board for students. So just wondering, what are the vape detectors looking like now? What's the usage of those, and what will that look like moving forward?
Right. And I think that absolutely, right, is the board, that's the business of the board. Like, do we need more vape detectors? So I think we could say, like, based on the data that's presented, we have vape detectors right now in our newer restrooms. Ms. Powell talked about at our CIP, last CIP conversation, that as we expand to the next set of restrooms, they will have vape detectors. So as we continue to do the modernizations, we can add them. So like the board can say, we want to keep prioritizing those things. And I agree, those things are very much so in your lane. And so I guess the question is, we do have them. They're in our newer bathrooms down here. The ones that we have not touched do not have those things, but that could most certainly continue to be a priority of the board, that as we modernize the restrooms, to include them there. And I
And-
see Ms. Powell.
Yeah, I just want to add to the why only the newer restrooms have them and the older ones don't, because I could imagine that might be a question that you would have. We learned from the experiences at K-Tech, because they were actually the first, they were early adopters for these vape detectors. Even before we acquired K-Tech, they had them. And what we learned from the experience at K-Tech is, if students have access to water, like the sinks, they will use that to keep the vape detectors from going off. And it just makes a major mess in the bathroom. So in order to have the vape detectors work in the old style bathrooms, you pretty much have to post up staff to keep the sinks from being used in a way that creates this massive, like, water mess all over the floor. So that's why we're just rolling them out when we get to the nicer, more private restrooms that you see out here in B Commons. And then all the middle school has them, and they just got the final programming and activation in the past week. In fact, I saw some emails where admin were like, what are these messages we're getting? Because they just got turned on, so to speak, or fully functioning at the middle school recently. So.
Is that the case at Lugo McGinnis as well? Are there vape detectors? Are there instances with vaping, or?
I've not been involved with putting vape detectors in at Lugo for the same reason, because of the way
Okay.
the restrooms are structured. But I mean, it's not to say that it's not worth trying. That we haven't been approached by the administration to prioritize that as one of our improvements there. So we've done some other things there for safety.
Yeah, anecdotally, I haven't heard like that is a problem, but I'm just thinking proactively, especially as, like, I feel like the enrollment for Lugo McGinnis, I'm not sure like what the numbers are right in front of me, but I feel like it has increased, especially as more students are like opting to go to Lugo instead of just the like larger high school at CHS. So I just wonder if that's something that will be
Yeah.
thought of in the future.
And I know Dr. Trotter's here, and I know we've met frequently. He's doing a thumbs up. I mean, I haven't heard him say issues about vaping over there. Thumbs up, thumbs down.
I think I want to reiterate too, like, we want students to self-refer. We want to hear from parents. We want to support students before it is a violation of student rights and responsibilities. And so as often as we can help individuals come to terms with the fact that they're having difficulty, and then we can support them through that, then our goal would be that they never have to encounter discipline. We're not going to use discipline when a student comes to their school counselor and says, like, I'm struggling with this. And so as much as you all can share with your constituents that we have these services available, we share as much as we can. I appreciated Ms. Bryant, in the past, you've said like, how do we have these services at our school? I think this is something that we have. And we want to help our students who are struggling.
Thank you.
And I would just have a quick question. I know that kids are getting younger and younger. And
Mhm.
so have we thought about like, having them and as we're moving fifth grade back to the elementary school, is having those thinking about you maybe having those in those schools too, because it's a growing issue. And for a lot of parents, they don't know, especially when your kid's a lot younger, because a lot of the times the vapes look like toys.
They do.
And so, just kind of also keeping that in mind as well.
And we have school mental health professionals trained for the high school and the middle school. So middle schoolers can receive brief challenges. If we had, I don't think brief challenges is probably developmentally appropriate for elementary. Like we would have to look at that, but we do have within the health and PE, we have that prevention and talking about vapes. And we have had as young as fifth grade and fourth grade. Sometimes they're even bringing something to school that they don't know what it is. So yeah, we definitely hear you that this is not just a high school issue.
I think, is there an opportunity to add resources to our website? Like the well-being site doesn't have any information that I can see. Like vapes terrify me. I'm on the Student Health Advisory Committee and there's a nurse from UVA on that we were all at like just the additives and people think that vapes are now a safe alternative, which they very much are not. And so I just think we need to push the education and just beat people over the head with it, that like it is addictive, it is not safe. And I think making that more forward facing would be a consideration.
And I would like for us to do a campaign around it. I know that, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, when I went to the VSB training, they did one of the schools had did like a campaign around vaping, and they had like billboards and like all this information on their websites. In their schools, they had information that you could access. And I think that we just need to start thinking about how we kind of push that information out. And I would say with our children being younger and younger and having access to the internet, we need to start having those conversations earlier. Because they already know, like we may be afraid to have conversations, but trust me, if they have a tablet or a phone, they have access to the information already anyway.
Yep, and I think, and we definitely are noting that and tracking that, Ms. Cooper, with you. Dr. Trotter had shared some information with me and I passed it along to the team. We definitely see the big part as far as just making sure we keep the information in front of students and families that like, this isn't like some safe alternative. And so I think that that's the part we'll work through with the team, with Ms. Rasnick, with Ms. Malchuk and various folks in terms of how we continue to campaign this and keep this in front of our students and families, that this is definitely not a safe alternative.
Ms. Rasnick, I heard you mention the student component and just think, as Ms. Bryant and I are leaning in with our student mentors next year, if there's anything that we can help, get them involved in from the school board perspective and how they might assist with that messaging and link crew. Sounds like you were already working with SCA, but thank you.
Definitely link crew. Yes.
So colleagues, I think our tobacco policy is, again, it's got the piece about enforcement. It's also, again, mentions the need for referrals to resources. And so, I like our conversation about probably doing more education and the implementation side of it. And again, that's more on your side, Dr. Gurley. So
Yeah.
I do appreciate that. One thing I also cross-reference this with JFCF, which is drugs in school, because again, you're not just vaping tobacco products these days, if I understand this correctly, you're vaping other more illicit substances potentially. And so I guess And I think that's one of the incidences that came up previously is, more recently. And so I think in your, just for clarification, Dr. Gurley and staff, like, is a vape also potentially a drug? And then we trigger again, potentially, especially, again, I get concerned about, yes, we need to offer treatment opportunities for folks, but kids who are selling drugs or adults who are selling drugs in our schools, that's a whole nother issue.
Yes.
And I think a lot more serious issue. And again, I think we know that's happening. And so, I mean, it looks like we can up to expel a student for that, if I understand things correctly, which they have to be pretty drastic in my mind. But also like could be selling really just bad stuff that could kill somebody. Like, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, so I'll just say, like, I wanted to bring that to my colleagues' attention, but and I think, when we consider this, we need to think about that other side. And I do feel confident our policies are pretty good here. So, and it's kind of a whack-a-mole, and things we need to educate our students about definitely and then keep focused on. But I feel good about where we're at currently with a set of policies and how they're written at the moment.
Well, actually, I have a question. So without getting too specific, how is there any case under which someone could be distributing a vape and still have the same amount of time, like suspension or whatever, as a student who is the one receiving, though they're both maybe engaging in dealing with or having interaction with the vape? Like, what type of larger precedent are we setting or example to students that, like, I can go through this process, this help, this support, and I can be out here distributing these sort of devices and still end up with the same amount as a student who is smoking it or whatever? Like,
Right.
how do we?
I don't think that I don't think you're going to see cases where we have substantiated that a student is distributing
Okay.
and the student is getting the same instance.
Okay.
I know that sometimes there are concerns that, like, you know, Johnny brought it to school and Jane was, smoking or whatever they call it, puffing with the person. They were both puffing, and sometimes families feel like, well, my child didn't bring it to school. And there's some delineation there where on the surface, sometimes it looks like it's the same because one student brought it and the other student was just, part of like pulling off of it. But when you dig deeper, the responses, because a lot of times we don't call them consequences, the responses are different.
Okay.
So, but yes, I mean, when we talk about distribution, I mean, there's a definition of, and there's a threshold when it comes to distribution.
Yeah, I understand that, like, again, our rule is not regulation, but I guess to avoid having to, like, sit with these instances as they arise, like, how are we putting into policy a difference there? Like, what is that?
Well,
what does that look like?
it's generally easy for us because it's in code. When we talk about distribution, I think what's hard is, when you get something from, everything that you get is usually a generalization because the parent is saying, this is what happened to my child. And then sometimes they will say, I know what happens to that other child, but they don't because, they don't have access to the letter. They don't have access to, what the family did, what the school did to delineate the two. And so I think a lot of times you're in a tough place because you're just left to like kind of piece the puzzle together. And then I've already talked to like the school. I've put my eyes on like the letters, but then I can't share with the other family like your child actually didn't get the same thing. And the distribution part is, I mean, I think it's easy on our end because again, you can't write a policy that's different than what's in code when it comes to distribution. I mean, a parent may want that, but I mean, it's state code and it's just not gonna happen.
So it would be against code for us to create our own policy that says if you have a vape and another student isn't like using your vape, that there are additional consequences for that. That would be out of line.
Say it one more time.
if you bring a vape to school, since everybody should not be vaping,
Right.
and then another student is getting your vape and it is trackable or traceable that it's your vape, should there not be more consequences? And do we not have a specific policy about that? I'm only asking because it is like we talk about, greater threats to the general
Right.
population of other students, and that is a prime example of one. Like if I'm
Yeah,
passing my vape around.
I think I think it's an interesting one, but I think that that's one that we could be here all day with. And I think at the end of the day, the reason why we have moved from like using the word consequences to responses at the state level is because what are we ultimately trying to get at? And if a student brought a vape to school, not with the intent to distribute, but like I'm puffing on it, and this student, and I brought a vape, I'm puffing it, Miss Burns uses my vape. I mean, the behaviors aren't different. I mean, how I address the behaviors in terms of what I need them to ultimately stop doing. But I mean, it's to me, the intent is the same. Because in these instances, and I think in the instant, and I want to say this, because in these instances, what we do, what we find is that I'm never forcing Miss Burns to pull from my vape.
Right.
So, and I think it gets to a larger systemic thing that when we start then want to like, who brought this vape that's green with a number 1 on it? When we talk about what administrators spend so much time on, it's investigating these things, but then we hear teachers saying like, nobody's coming in my class. Well, I mean, this is when we ask them to get this granular that like Royal brought a vape, Amanda also puffed from it. He did not like put it up to her lips. She was like, "Can I get some?" That I can delineate, but ultimately we both wanted the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not leaving my vape with her.
I mean, I get that. And I feel like now we're getting into like law and order, like court.
But that's what this is turning into, right?
And it is, right. But what I'm saying is if I have a vape and no one else is like using vapes up to this point, right? But I'm going to the bathroom and there are 4 other students in there and I'm like, oh yeah, you should try this. You should try this. Though I am not forcing them to, now 4 students are interacting with a vape when they may not have otherwise. And we're not even going to talk about the vape detectors because maybe it's not working that day. Point being, is there not more consequences for that student? And to get back to the point of policy, what are the policies to make sure that there are, if any at all, differences in how what kind of stair step do we have for that? Because I feel like that actually is a little more unacceptable. And I feel like we're not going to deter more students from bringing vapes and making it a fun community activity if we don't have those types of things written in policy. So I'm just trying to bring it back to like the policy piece. I know we're kind of on the edge of regulation, but
Yeah, no, I understand. Like, what are we doing for the person who's bringing what are we doing for the person that's bringing the vape? And there are differences. There are differences. And I can think of an instance where there are differences. But I mean, if I say both of you got 3 days out, but you get 3 days, but you get to do brief challenges. But my 3 days, I don't get brief challenges. I have done something different
okay.
because you're coming back sooner. But if your parent declines it, then we both got the same thing.
Yeah.
That's on your parent.
And we're talking about vapes, but I mean that for marijuana. I mean that for every single
And we do.
substance.
Yeah,
that
and we
shouldn't
do. And we do that for every single, I mean, it's not that we're just giving everybody a blanket. You were in the bathroom, you get 5 days.
be. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's also, sorry to like continue on this, but I do think it's important, especially with recent incidents. If there is a student who has a vape and it has something other than, I guess, tobacco or whatever, THC, right? Like, what are the, I guess, changes there?
Oh, yes, it's a big,
different.
yeah, we clearly delineate when
Okay.
it's THC versus a regular nicotine vape.
But also the code for distribution is even, like, I guess my point is what is legally considered distribution can be argued one way or the other, and we see it all the time in court, right? So
so-
like, how are we How is that?
Yeah,
So a lot of what I'm hearing you all talk about with a vape being shared and things like that doesn't necessarily rise to the legal standard for distribution, but there are legal standards for distribution, and thankfully, unlike the nuances around discipline, which are more in the student rights and responsibilities as to who had what responsibility in any given incident, when it comes to distribution in the schools, when there's a quantity of substance we don't allow in school. And then, of course, when it comes to the contraband, there are different schedules. They talk about Schedule A, B,
Right.
C. Admin, none of us need to make those decisions. That's where the police come in. They assess what's been confiscated, and then the process goes from there. And that process is out of that piece is, out of our hands. And it is largely quantity driven.
So that
But the
question was, I
assessment
was
was-
actually going to go to a point that's beyond vapes. And it's also beyond, like I'm saying, the threshold is a certain amount for the legal code, but like, what if it doesn't reach that, but there is proven distribution? Like, then how do you decide? Right, like a transaction. And if it's like, it is a transaction, how are we?
I should clarify, you make a great point. It's quantity based unless someone's caught in the act.
Okay,
If they're
thank
caught
you.
in the act, then it's the same as if it were a quantity based decision as far as the legal part.
Right. I think it just does get tricky. Yeah, because like if a student is bringing a certain, like they're like, I feel like students are also savvy and they know that this will not reach the distribution threshold, but I still want to do what I want to do. So I was just wondering okay, thank you.
Kind of along those lines, but not. I was just curious regarding our student rights and responsibilities when we look at the SBAR codes, which are the BSC codes. I was just curious as to why, and maybe this isn't the most updated version. So there's alcohol possessing, there's alcohol distribution or distributing, which goes up to level 4. But then when we drop down to drugs, which is BSC 3, there's possessing and violating, but there's no distribution there. So I just didn't know if that's something that we can look at or
It's in category E.
in E.
So within the student rights responsibilities and SBAR codes come from the state. We identify our available levels of response. That's how we can, maybe the first time a student engages in a disciplinary matter, they might have a different consequence than the third time or the fourth time. But the codes itself come from how we have to report. So like and I printed it, but it's very small. Like we know when students have possessed versus distributed, whether it's alcohol, drugs, or tobacco, based on how it is like coded from the administrator.
So that's BE S0, 5, 6, and 7. You should know those from memory. I'm very impressed.
I
that you
don't
knew
know
that.
them from memory. I at least have the
Yeah,
list in
Dr.
front of
Charles
me.
said yes.
Those are the ones. Okay. All right. And so anything that's detected in the vapes, the THC, that would fall under these categories. So there is a higher threshold of potential disciplinary action that could be.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if you, so there's in our student rights responsibilities, there's the part that talks about the leveled responses and there's the tables. But if you go below that, it's more kind of there's more paragraphs. There is specific description for alcohol, drug possession, and distribution that is kind of more clearly outlined than like just the chart with the little X's.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, I think for me, what I hear, and again, thank you everybody for the discussion. I mean, we have the policy, but I think we've heard kind of just overall concern. I mean, and we're all in agreement of that. So to whatever extent, and I'm speaking for myself personally, that you, Dr. Gurley, and your staff can get in place to just provide more targeted supports and again, pushing out that education younger and younger and whatever we can do. I know I've talked to a few different people just collaboratively again about getting together with UVA and Albemarle and trying to do some big community outreach or educational. I mean, that's kind of the big reach and the big goal. And Miss Burns, I'm sitting here trying to figure out the name of that lady that we heard speak at VSBA. So if you can help and down the road, like email everybody again, her name that we heard at an early bird session. I mean, it was so powerful, her presentation and just, I mean, frightening. As far as what she's a researcher. I thought she was from Boston University. At VCU? Oh, I thought she was up. Anyway, but they actually retrieve some of the vapes and do research on the what's in the vapes and looking at the damage. Anyway, so is there anything else that we need to?
One last quick question.
Go
As
ahead.
far as the vape detectors go, are they only, I guess this is a question for Ms. Power, are they only seen to be effective in bathrooms, or are we thinking about stairwells? Like, how's that? What are the instances outside of the bathrooms?
So generally, we focused on putting them in the newer restrooms because those are areas where you can't supervise the students readily like that. That was the thinking. And when they're in stairwells and things like that, ideally our CSA team and other staff members are, knowing what those areas are and are in those same spaces. So we haven't really explored putting them in those areas, and we haven't heard from the schools over, that was be something we would need to prioritize now. But yeah, so not at this time. And also I should add, Dr. Heltz texted me to let me know that they discontinued they don't have any active vape sensors now at K-Tech in any of the restrooms. They had piloted the one and then they didn't, and that one's, they're not even using that one now. So that's the status. I didn't want you going there thinking that they had them, but I'm very grateful for the lessons we learned from them being the trailblazers and what they tried back again before we even owned K-Tech.
Thank you.
All right, so it sounds like the expectations that what's outlined in that policy are appropriate. Ms. Swift just motioned that she's taking some notes. And then we will work on continue to add substance to what's already there. We will now focus our attention, if you want to pull up policy JL, fundraising and solicitation. I know this recently came up. Ms. Hoover, so we've done some work on this. Initially. I will tell you that I don't know that this one is one that we need to spend a lot of time on this evening because we've done a survey, and what that survey is telling us is that there's a lot of work among our staff that we will need to do. Specifically, as we look at the qualitative data from the survey, that staff members, have general concerns about I put a lot of work into doing these grants and who gets the property and Ms. Samolchek can expound on that some more. But I think what we know right now is that some of the immediate things before we go straight into no more crowdsourcing, the first thing we talked about in our meetings is that we really need to educate people on like how to access the funds in the building. First, like, do you know how much money is allocated? Making sure that like we're planning whatever projects and things in our building. We've talked about, I had a meeting with Ms. Gillikin before she ended her term, and we were talking about rugs in classrooms. And that was a big conversation we had earlier in the school year. And we know that that's one of the things that people were doing, like we're doing crowdsourcing to get new rugs. And so what we've talked about is what is a rug replacement schedule? Like, I mean, it's a real thing in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, that these little kiddos sit on these rugs all school year and they get very yucky. Um, that's Holland's word, not mine. They do, they get really yucky. And so like, how can we replace, so how can we, instead of buying teachers, instead of getting a $150 rug, get a $400 rug that'll last 2 years so that every other year you're getting a new rug. So coming up with a rug replacement schedule and, you know, hearing the things that are really important from our staff. Mr. Molchek, do you want to just give us like what the survey that we put out to the staff?
Sure. So this was a survey that we put out, it was just over a couple days, but we heard from about 200 staff members on this. And without going into details, I would say that the two chief concerns that came up from the survey were just the request that teachers be able to manage their own classrooms and fulfill student needs based on their own professional judgment. But dovetailing with that, I think it was also that message that they use crowdfunding, or they having the option to use crowdfunding in their own way is needed because they don't feel that they have access to sufficient resources for the things that they know that they need. And so in response to that, the conversation that we've initiated among the staff is basically that before we go into regulating into any more details about policy changes and then related regulations where we say, you know, these are the platforms that are okay, and this is the process, and these are the amounts of money. We need to make sure that we believe there's a lot of good work, some of which Dr. Gurley gave the example of the rugs, but there's a lot of other examples that we don't have to go into of how staff at a lot of different levels can work to make sure we're filling in the gaps that are leading people to crowdsource in the first place. And we think there's really a lot that we have available to us at this time that would be able to go a long way. But at the same time, I just want to say we're really glad that the board brought this up so that we could begin this conversation with the staff, because it's clearly it's very close to teachers' hearts, you know, being able to properly source their classrooms and get their students give their students basic needs, but also enrichment needs. And I think that this is going to spur a really important conversation about how we can just make sure that the left hand knows what the right hand needs, and so that they can help each other out. So that's I think that's where we're at.
Thank you. What questions?
Oh, part of this, there is an equity element to this in my mind. Just there are some teachers that are just maybe better at writing grants or at putting needs out there. Others maybe are stretched than in other directions. And so, my interest in this area is not to restrict teachers' ability to provide for their students. I think we all agree that the teachers are closest to them in knowing what the need is. But I wouldn't want a student in one classroom to be disadvantaged because they're not in another. And so I'm very appreciative of the work that you're doing to educate about the funds that we do have available. And Ms. Hoover, probably some of like, how do you even go about accessing those and purchase orders and timelines? And there's certainly going to be a need to do some planning ahead. So fun times ahead.
Yep. And that's really where we landed, that, you know, the answer is never no. Sometimes it's like not right now. And we want to help people like be able to plan like down the road. I think a lot of times what we learned through this survey and conversation is that sometimes it's like, I know I can get this done in like the next 10 days versus the procurement process can be like 30 days in some instances, and it doesn't seem like it's going to accomplish what you need in the time allotted. So letting people know that like, okay, the money is there, and you know, generally we find a way as long as it's aligned with the curriculum. And so I think that the education piece, I think there will be a lot of aha moments like, oh, I didn't realize that I could do that. That's what we're hoping from this process anyway.
I guess my question is, if that was already in place, why is this just coming up?
If what's in place?
Like, for teachers to be able to access the resources or the funding, to be able to do what they need to do, whether that's changing a rug in the class. Why haven't teachers known about this process?
I don't think that it's not that they don't know. I think what we see a lot of, it's the people who are like doing the above and beyond. And we see a lot of, that's what really draws a lot of the attention. There is funding to meet everything that is in our curriculum. But when want the razzle dazzle, or when you want to take it up a notch, it's like, let me go and see if I can get the funds from somewhere else, because that will enhance, or it's meeting my needs at a faster pace than going through the school process. We heard some dialogue about, we know that this donor is willing to support this classroom initiative. So it's not that the school doesn't have the funds or resources. It's like, I know that that this person is willing to invest in my classroom. So a lot of things trigger or prompt a teacher to want to do the funding for classroom projects, versus it's not that the money doesn't exist in the school. And from the accountability on our piece, what we also recognize too is that our administrators, Ms. Cooper, do have to do a better job of like making sure that the teachers understand like what the process, that this is available. And then as we think about, we've had conversations about inflation, right? Sometimes it's like, yep, the money is there, but stuff definitely costs more. And so what does it look like if we are changing the per pupil ratio? So those are all like, really good data points that we need to help synthesize as we move forward with supporting staff.
I have a question. How are I would love to see if there's any data around what types of classes are using that additional funding for their purposes, mainly because the more project-based courses are using or probably likely getting more funding for additional resources for things of that nature. But I mean, I think we have discussed for a while with achievement gap and Black achievement and things of that nature, those students who are students of color are often not in those project-based courses. And so what I have seen is, just from observation, we are seeing more Black and brown teachers creating these fundraising platforms, donors choose, whatever it may be, because their students are food insecure or bringing other needs into the classroom that may not be directly tied to whatever the curriculum
Right.
is for that course. And so I've seen a lot of angles from community members being like, let's all as a community band together and support this Black teacher who has less resources for whatever reason.
Right.
And I just think, as far as equity, if we're keeping that at the center of this policy discussion, how are we making sure that all of the teachers are being equitably funded, and where's the data around that?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have a baseline. So, there's level funding where there's an allocation for all teachers. I think that, Ms. Bryan, and particularly in our community, there's always a call to help, and people just, and I shouldn't even say a call to help, like people just want to do, they inherently want to do. And so I think a lot of times what catches our attention is people are like, we're going to focus on Royal's classroom because we know that, he's working with a particular population of students. One thing that I took away from this is that we should never be crowdsourcing for food insecurity. We have pantries, we have the resources in-house, and that is publicized. People do it anyway. And I think, again, when we continue to live in worlds of generalities and responding to people speaking in generalities, we're going to continue to promote this notion that we don't have, or these poor children. And that's not the narrative. I mean, we fund, we partner. I mean, every resource that we can think about, we have access to support our students. but it still doesn't stop the next organization to come and say, we really want to do these things. And, you know, it feels like bad business to turn someone away, to say, well, no, we don't want that. So it just, you know, I think a lot of times that's the feeling that we see these things happening and it's because we don't have, and it's just because a lot of times people want to do, but we definitely have educated people on like their their clothes closets, food pantries. You know, we're giving out gift cards, book bags. I mean, and so, but when we talk about data points, when we embarked upon this work, we logged in to see like how many active, I forgot the site we went to, Donors Choose, there was one active. So we're having a conversation now and there's only one active Donors Choose. So, I mean, and so when we think about how we spend time, how we spend resources, we are talking about only one active Donors Choose, and we've done that for how many minutes? So that's why it's like, what are we trying to solve here? And that's
Well,
why
I don't
thought
even
this would be-
remember how exactly the topic came up.
Yeah.
But my issue wasn't food insecurity in particular, like as far as like snacks being donated and things of that nature. But I mean, this is a newer thing. I mean, there haven't been food pantries since
I've been here.
right, since you have been here, but that's not a thing that's been around
But
forever.
it's
So
it's not been long, but it's like we don't have to live in the past, right?
No, we
Because
don't, but
when people come to the podium, like we want them to talk about what's happening right now. I mean, a lot of times people's lived experiences, let's value people's lived experiences, but like when you come to that podium and someone says, we're not providing these kids with, well, since I have been here, we have provided students with, so let's help people to stop speaking generally, like, because it is so harmful to the work you're doing, to the work teachers are doing. I mean, and these teachers are putting in a lot of sweat equity. So yeah, there's some value in it didn't happen in 2019, but in 2026, they can walk right up to the school and I mean, and we do it with so much dignity that no one should stand here and make those kind of statements.
well, I want us to be less defensive because we're not here to
No,
combat
that's not-
public opinion. But I just wanted us to like focus on the fact that
It's happening.
like it's happening, but also are we sure that, and this is not to come at any staff people in particular, but are we sure that it's being spread out equitably? Because I feel like
Absolutely.
that's why we have the citywide PTO fund. Like that didn't just arise because there's no need. There is a need to make sure that every school is getting the same amount of resources. So for us to sit here and act like that's not an issue, it is.
But
And that's
that's
why
not
they exist.
crowdsourcing.
So I just want to make sure
Yeah.
point crowdsourcing PTO, the point is to bring resources to our students and to our
Right.
schools. So the question was, are we making sure that every single school has the same exact opportunities? And I think
Yes.
that like, I don't want us to because when we start trying to respond to public opinions, we get off track. So I just want us to like refocus on that.
Yeah, and that's what's bringing us here because we want to support our families. And I think that what the citywide PTO is doing, I mean, they are ensuring, so that's another tool that to ensure that there is access, that all schools do have the same funding. So when we are having these conversations, it's not defensive by any means. It's like making sure that we are educating, because that's the part you're holding us accountable to, right? To make sure that like people understand. And this is like one area that we can unequivocally say that there's no gap. Like there's no gap that like we are constantly pushing out. We have mental health professionals, our social workers, like we are always out in front of these things. And so that's mutually exclusive from like, okay, so if we're crowdsourcing, what things are we attempting to access?
For sure.
And making sure that people aren't duplicating efforts, because teachers are putting in a lot of sweat equity, and we appreciate that. But we want to make sure that we can take some of that lift from them, that like, these are the things you can access and within our locus of control. And then, yes, absolutely, you can still go out and seek these things, and then these will be the parameters.
So with that being said, since we are having this conversation on the record, I'm confident that we should not hear that any teachers or any school is having these gaps, because you're telling us that all of the needs are met and there shouldn't be any needs in this way. So I'm
I'm
just
saying
hoping
that
that
if
we
you-
don't receive any emails or calls like,
But
"Oh,
you're
actually,
always going to find, like, if you're looking for something, you're always going to find, you can
I'm not
find
feeling
it.
for it," but I'm
No,
just
no,
saying,
no.
like,
I'm
are
saying,
people gonna reach out, right? Like,
yeah,
are
they will, because what you have to remember, and the reason why I was saying, like, if you're looking for something, you'll find it, not you, but I'm saying, if there's something you need in your classroom, and it's like, it doesn't fit, it's not fitting perfectly within the curriculum, then it's like, yes, you want to seek outside, but almost always that when it's in alignment with the curriculum, we're funding those things. So someone's gonna say, well, in my class, there's like, we're short on tissues, we're short on this. Well, I mean, what part do we start and the community stop? Where does the start and stop? So absolutely, you're always going to get an email, but I can tell you that we always find a way. So I'm not going to stop the emails, but I'm always going to continue to find a way.
Okay, so all needs are met. That's good. Thank you.
I do have a question about this potential policy, or maybe while we're looking at the potential, it wouldn't affect, like, I think of like the Black Knight Athletic Club who sells sweatshirts with a tap to pay, or when I go to theater production and I'm tap to pay a Venmo for some snacks, or it's
No,
not
ma'am.
going to affect any of those types of
No.
things. Okay.
So can they still, like, a teacher still apply for the Public Education Foundation grants?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
That's totally different.
Okay.
Ms. Richardson, I didn't want to forget you online there. Do you have any input or questions?
No, I don't have any questions, but I mean, we're talking about funding and grants, and I did participate in the federal program advisory meeting today, and I just want to highlight the great work that everyone is doing with Title I to Title V. So we know there's money coming in, and we're figuring out how to use it for our students. So I just want to say we appreciate the hard work that those groups are putting towards our schools.
Thank you. And then just want to check one more time. Ms. Dooley, this kind of meets this discussion and met your inquiry into this. Thank you. All right, anything else, board members, around this?
Will we see this, like, your group will gather more information? We may see it again or hold off, or do we know?
Well, you're going to see some regulatory changes. I mean, well, may or may not. I mean, yeah, we have a lot of teacher facing work that we need to do just to make sure, again, I think we've learned a big part of this is education. So we may not need to make any changes, but we definitely know we need to engage teachers more based on the feedback that we're receiving.
And then if we are receiving as board members, kind of that feedback of like, well, I can't get this, or I don't have that, or we have kids that need clothes, we should be referring them to their principal and then to Dr. Johnson and her team. Like, is that the appropriate avenues?
Yep,
for-
you can just use the published mechanisms that we already have out there.
Great, thank you.
So Dr. Gurley,
Yes.
in the slide deck, you have a policy regulation that is revised that has very significant revisions. So what I think if I hear things correctly is after some feedback loop that is not
It's not
current.
appropriate.
We're not looking at making 5 pages worth of, okay, they're the regs. Okay. Thank you.
And
That's not published on the website either. So the regulation, that's just the revised, and yes, and we'll look at that.
And Dr. G, I feel a little concerned that we might have left it a little bit of a confusing place. So I just wanted to make sure that we're being clear that I think that around requests for basic needs, I think we feel like we've got the pipelines for that fully in place. And that's just like getting the right person to the right place. And I think for the other piece, that's where working with the teachers, working with the administrators, talking about how to make sure, like I said, the left hand knows what the right hand needs. I think there's a lot more work that we need to do there.
I wanted to just,
Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. Yeah, I think you make a point real quickly too that I remember, and I don't remember, it doesn't matter who, but it was a newer principal, and looking at the end of the year, budget. You know, there was a big chunk of money sitting there, and it was just a matter that that newer principal didn't realize that they could be spending and using that money. So just as a reminder that it's education to teachers, but it may also be education to newer principals that that money is there and available.
And sometimes it's experience because, and this happens from top to bottom with principals, department heads, anytime you're managing a budget, until you go through at least one cycle to see what the needs are for a full year, because there's nothing an administrator at any level wants to do worse than have to come to their leadership and say, can I get more money? Because the way that school, it's not like we're a for-profit business where we can do something to boost sales, right? The income's pretty locked in at the beginning of the year in many ways. And everybody's just trying to make sure they don't overshoot their line. So it's a little bit of that is experience with new administrators. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, thank you. Ms.
that's
Bryant?
that's where my question was actually going to be about, like, how are our teachers saying from experience that like they're having a hard time with their principals approving things, and like you're saying, like a principal may not want to come ask for more money, but as a result, like, are all of the things that teachers could be using, are those needs actually being met? Because like if you're seeing a chunk of money at the end of the year, but also our budget is steadily increasing as a school division, that's like a problem. Like it just doesn't add up. So like, how are we making sure that those funds are being used as requested? And like, what are like, if it's up to the principal's discretion of like, oh, I'm going to turn this one down or I'm going to use this one, then we get into, I feel like, deeper conversations about whose classes are, back to my point about project-based courses and the like demographics of those classes. Like, how are we, I guess that would be some of the numbers that I would like to see as a follow-up. Like, how are we tracking all of those things? What classes are getting funded more? What are the demographics? What's the makeup of those courses? Like, I think we should get granular on this, especially because, like, again, we're not trying to restrict fundraising from teachers, but like, since we have such a philanthropic community, I do think that type of data would be helpful for the public to know as well.
I want to push back on it a little bit because I feel a lift there because I'm trying to make sure that I understand in the interim what we're trying to solve in terms of, so anything, I want to make sure I'm saying that right. Anything, so all of our curriculum related things covered, right?
Yes.
So in terms of,
Like, what type of requests are you getting? Like, just, I guess that would be interesting. If they're having to fill out a form, there should be like files of these forms or something like that to be able to pull and say, okay, we have a trend of.
Ms. Hoover, are we talking about, so I guess I'm trying to figure out like I'm trying to think of a starting point on like what request.
Which ones aren't getting funded and why? Ultimately, that's the larger question.
But it's usually not like we're not usually putting in, like, I don't think that they're normally, I mean, I guess they would be putting in, like, I'm attempting to do a marshmallow project. I'm just making up something.
Yeah.
I'm attempting to do a marshmallow project. So I need marshmallows, popsicle sticks. But I think what I would be looking at is like, this would be something that are expecting them to do. Like anything that we're expecting them to do is cut. Like, yeah, I think we can figure out a way to look at what things have been denied.
That's ultimately.
Use the microphone, please. And turn it on.
And looking at the policy, the last statement is that the superintendent makes a report back to the board on the fundraising efforts that have been made at the school level. So he can make a part of that report is what fundraising efforts were denied by them, by the principals, and why.
Okay. But I think that that's not the question. The question is not about what fundraising efforts are being denied. It's what additional like funding is going to classrooms for their specific causes.
Okay, I think if I remember last year, like Harper, who graduated yesterday, would clapping, would at times bring to the board like her art teacher needed more things and felt like she wasn't funded.
Right.
I think that's
what
where
I'm
you're
trying to
going.
exactly.
And
But
if
you remember what happened with that,
I
right?
do, is that it was like when they had to submit their plans, their lesson plans with all their like asks for the year as you were building the budget, it was like, oh, they hadn't budgeted for said items. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't in there. And then they went back and asked, like, I think.
And we made it, and we made it
happen.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why I think that we can provide you these data points. I think that what would be really taxing and hard is that there are often stories that go along with it. And I think that was a really good one. And I mean, and nothing against the teachers. I mean, because Harbor was advancing it too. She was getting the information from the staff members. But what had happened was there were some timelines, not like this wasn't something that was originally budgeted. So what we could do is like, when we got to the end of the school year, what available funds? And so I think that, yes, you can see it, but then you may not get the whole story. So then again, you may make some general assumptions based on what you see, but then like after you unpack, and I just feel like that's a lot of work, and I don't know that that was the work of this part. That wasn't the work of this.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. And I'm not suggesting that y'all don't make it happen. Like, we appreciate the work that y'all are doing. And I want to be clear about that. I'm just saying that we're trying to help the teachers, period. So I would like to see the data around this so that if this is a recurring problem, that community can come in and help. Or if there are things I need, but like, I feel like we're asking, what are we solving for? But we don't even clearly know the problem because the survey just went out. Right? Like,
Well, no,
like you
this
had
wasn't prompted
200.
by, but you got to remember the crowdsourcing is what prompted the survey. So that's why I said, what problem are we trying to solve with
Yeah.
crowdsourcing?
Right. Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Like, I guess I just want to know, like, how can we make it all an equal conversation, crowdsourcing and funding from within the building? And I feel like the only way we do that is by level setting with some sort of data or something to know who's crowdsourcing and why, or who's getting funded and why, and who's not getting funded. And I feel like right now we're just talking hypothetically. We're mentioning stories that like everyone doesn't even know. So it's like,
Right. Well, I mean, and that's why that's why I appreciate the perspective you brought to the board, because that's why I'm saying right now there's only one crowdsource out there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that we want more information, and I guess I weigh that with when this was about anything and maybe about policymaking too, Ms. Bryant. But like, all right, well, we have to collect that information. Somebody's got to fill out a form. Somebody's got to process it, et cetera, right? And all of a sudden, we've created more administration and bureaucracy and hoops that teachers have to go through and administrators have to go through to implement things. So, and maybe I'm misinterpreting you, Ms. Bryant.
I think
Okay.
you are, because I actually want to make it easier, but I need to know like how many instances of like we're having a policy discussion and we don't have, I feel like, enough information. I'm new to the board, so I wasn't here last year when Harper was advocating for whatever she was advocating for, and I don't know how many teachers have reached out to board members over the past few years about this issue in particular. So yes, someone will have to collect the data, but I think we won't have to do it every single time if we have a baseline set of understanding of how widespread this issue is. But right now, when we're sitting here trying to fill in information that we don't have, it feels like, what are we exactly trying to do? I think that is, I think you and I have the same question. What are we trying to solve for? Are we trying to say that we want there to be a more streamlined process for when teachers are crowdfunding? Ultimately, like, is that the bigger picture? Or are we trying to make sure that all of the resources stay within the schools? Like, what are we solving for? Well, we would need to know more information about what the current problem is and the state of things. So that's, I have a hard time making policies around things I don't know about.
No, I understand that, but so what do you think is the problem?
Well, I'm not a teacher, so that would be helpful to look at the survey and to see what the teachers are saying. But I think the problem here is that I stated before is that we want to make sure that all teachers are equitably having the same access to all resources within the building. And if they're not, how do we engage the community to be able to meet those needs? And it's not just about snacks, it's about whatever is needed for project-based things that are going on, or if a teacher does want to go above and beyond, what does that look like? Like, we want our teachers to go above and beyond, and we want to support them, and the community wants to support them. So what does that look like procedurally? And I think we won't have to revisit this every year, every May, if I feel like we have like a very, like a clear conversation. So that's all I'm not asking for unnecessary data collection from the division. I just don't want to have this same exact conversation next May. So I'm just trying to be
Ms. Bryant,
proactive.
for me, timeline wise, it seems like we're getting into like budget territory that like this is, I think a lot of this is how are we allocating funds more broadly in our budget to schools, and then from schools to departments or programs or whatever it might be. And so that's where we maybe need to think about like, what is the data, the information that we want leading into our next budget cycle, feedback from teachers about where they felt like, they were stretched too thin or didn't have enough or had too much, although they may not ever tell us that they had too much. That I think we've veered into different territory than what my initial.
Yeah,
was.
but I think it is appropriate though. I'll get Ms. Hoover and we'll work on like pulling requests, because I think more largely it does have budget implications. And so that'll be a great segue into
I think what you're hearing though, like back to our board policy roles, like you're hearing some conversation about like what our expectations are, right? And
Right. That's,
then we would defer to you to make that happen.
Yeah, whether it's now or like later, closer to budget season, I just think it would be helpful for us to have this data. And so it doesn't have to be like an ASAP type of thing. But I just want there to be better processes in place so we don't reinvent the wheel every year, every time we're trying to write a budget or decide what we're going to ask the city for, because there are questions about how we are spending our funds. And I don't want like us to see a bunch of fundraisers or whatever, and then that to be further implying that we're not using our funds correctly when we are. So yeah, that's ultimately what I'm trying to achieve.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant, for clarifying.
thank you. We're ready for our next one. All right. So our next policy that we will draw our attention to is IKEC. That's our promotion and retention policy. And I think that I lost my place. Okay. So I think that I know that this one has been near and dear to a few folks on this on our board. And I think the first thing, we need to do is come back to what I said originally in terms of, does the policy itself set the expectation of what you are looking for as a school board? Because remember, the other pieces are the pieces that we handle. So, in your reading of this, does this set the expectation, not the how or if you like, does IKEC set the expectation of students being promoted and or retained? And it's not the how.
I think the first thing that jumps out to me is that each student should learn the relevant grade level, like learn is subjective, not comprehend or master, or it's learn. So did you learn it? Sure, someone taught it to you, but did you comprehend it, retain it, master it to be promoted? That was the first piece that jumped out to me. I think the question about criteria goes to regulation. So understanding what the criteria is so that we can ensure it is equitable and that it isn't subjective. that it is a level playing field for all students was the next piece
So,
that jumped.
make sure I understand the criteria. So say that one more time.
So that the criteria for determining the promotion is equitable, so that it's clear, and I understand that that's probably in regulation,
Right. So,
not the
But
policy.
it may not be equitable depending on the student, right?
Right,
I mean,
I don't,
right,
whatever
but
their needs
it's
are.
applied equitably,
Sorry.
so that all student data is reviewed the same.
all right. So in the context of policy though, do you want criteria referenced? Because some of your comments sound like, when you talk about applying it, that's about regulation.
Right, yeah, I'm
So
agreeing.
you're okay with, it sounds like you were saying you're not okay with the word criteria.
No, I am.
Oh, you
just
are?
As long as we know what the criteria is on the regulation side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, because that's how we would ensure that the policy was being followed.
Mhm.
That there are set criteria that are clearly outlined in regulation. And if we were to refer to the regulation and see that over time, we were not applying that consistently, then we would be in violation of a policy.
Policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of feel
Yeah.
like I mean, even though it is the regulation piece, the criteria could change, the student, I
It
mean,
could.
and so to say that it's going to be clear in that regulation, I mean, they're constantly having to
The
update
regulations
that.
consistently change.
Correct. I'm just talking through
Right.
this with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that when we use terms like apply it equitably, that's where we run into some hard spaces, because either it's going to be this way applied all the time. Because sometimes that equitable piece is like who's doing it and who the child is. And I think that everything should be about who the child is. So make sure I say that. I think everything is about who the child is. But when I think you just have to make sure that people understand that if you want them to do it equitably and you want them to do it the same, and we use words like inconsistent, that they're all live in the same world, because all of those terms they're not the same, but I think we want the same outcome, if that makes any sense.
Does with fidelity make it better? I don't know.
I think with fidelity has a different level of intention to it, but I think that somebody would still argue it's still one of those same words, but Dr. Isley, you were going to say
I
something?
think what's important to remember here is that we have a variety of criteria and different sort of categories of criteria, from academic performance, developmental needs, other factors, and these things listed here sort of fit into that and are spelled out a little bit more further on. But it would be to say, this student with these specific exact developmental needs is a yes, and this one is a no, in terms of like every student is going to be unique and have different components here. We can't use one single point of criteria in making these decisions, which you see the multiple criteria up there. But particularly when we get to the developmental needs and you're talking about, individual, like even a student's physical development or their chronological age, or like it's going to be very hard to be like, if you have this birthday, then you like, I mean, that's what it kind of sounds like when I'm hearing you say like it's got to be this exact criteria. And I think we've got to look at all those pieces for every individual student, like Dr. Gurley said, and sort of look at the whole picture when these decisions are being made.
Can I also say, were you about to say something? Okay. Can I just also say that though, like there's a lot of ed tech issues here. And so I feel like when we're talking about retention, I feel like we definitely need a more robust ed tech policy, because there are students who are like being promoted who are not, like to Miss Burns' point, who are learning but are not comprehending, and that is a serious issue. And without that ed tech policy to be complementary to this, we are solving for something that we will be unable to solve for. So when we have like students taking like courses on, I think it's Edgenuity or things like platforms like that, and we're unsure, like, yes, this is getting into regulation, so please let me know. Like, I apologize, but I just want to say here, like, if students are passing courses on Edgenuity and there are no blockers up or like detectors of whether they're using outside sources to pass those like things that you can't Google search something when you're taking an SOL, but if you're on Edgenuity, can you, like, what are those policies in place and how are we monitoring that? And is it equal across all like spaces like Walk versus Lugo McGinnis? Like how, like, I just want to know how we're doing that before like making changes or additions to this policy, just because I feel like ed tech has really changed what retention should and shouldn't look like now. And we just don't have a really good policy for that right now, I don't think.
Right. Yeah.
I think Chris said
Well, just real quick, just to address that need there, everything that a student does on a Chromebook, which is all we allow students to use for our work, is every click or move that they make is trackable unless they're intentionally violating acceptable use policies. So it comes back to that. We educate students on how to make good choices. We put things and systems in place, like we use a program called ClassWise, which gives teachers who utilize it an access to every single screen that a child accesses during an event. And so, yes, during classroom instruction, if a teacher had suspicion or wanted to ensure that everything was being done in an integrity way, they could see every screen or generate a history after the fact if they had questions to see if that child veered. That same tool also allows teachers to lock down. So when they are taking an assessment or if technology is being used as the tool, they have ways to lock down and limit and restrict students to just those things. But it does most of it falls back to the student rights and responsibilities. We do try to give those tools and give staff what they need while educating a student on that expectation. We give them those tools to guide them while they're still maybe curious about trying to use Google to find an answer. You could certainly search that. And if a teacher in best practice is circulating the room, they're going to see that. But if they were really just looking at their device and had all those screens up, they could see instantly, that a child is putting in a search, what is the answer to this question?
No, yeah, for sure. I think those are definitely helpful. Thank you for that information. I think I wasn't really concerned about the movements on a Chromebook trackable. I am certain that students also know that. And I'm concerned about what are the larger implications of so much Chromebook usage or like these online platforms, like how are students genuinely comprehending and retaining the information that they need to be promoted to the next grade? I think that's so much bigger than that, but I do appreciate that, Mr. Cuomo, because like I have had questions about that before. But I was in a classroom before with a teacher and she was saying like, I think students know that you can see that. And I'm not concerned about those students. I don't mean to like generalize, but I'm not concerned about the students who are in like the higher level courses. I'm concerned about the students who are at risk for not even meeting grade level. Like, are they actually learning on these Chromebooks?
Yeah, I think we can delineate the two, particularly for the students you're referencing. I think we can segue back to the promotion retention. With the students, when we talk about whether students are retaining, we just had a conversation, and the conversation was about Lugo. And I think you can also generalize it to Walk. I mean, this conversation wasn't about Walk, but it was about the students at Lugo. And we were speaking about, like they were really knocking their SOLs out of the park, which was a graduation requirement. And while an SOL is one measure, so I mean, it's not always like the measure of whether the student has mastered the work, but I mean, it is an indicator of whether they are meeting the grade level material. And so we know that they are learning in a hybrid manner. You know, it's through Edgenuity online, and then they're getting the support of a classroom teacher. So what we see there is like, and we saw that by, you know, the 13 students who walked across the stage on yesterday, that yeah, you can master the material through an online platform with the appropriate supports. So I say all that to say that yes, it can happen through the online platform, and I think what we're trying to get to here through this promotion and retention is like, how do you know when a student has when they have obtained the information, when or I should say when they have retained the information, they know the information, and you know, at what point does a student move on, and at what point does a student need to do another year in the grade?
Yeah, like I'm proud of those students who graduated, and I'm confident that all of them should have graduated and have done the work, and that, you know, the teachers who worked with them did the work. However, I think that using graduation rates as like support for thinking that every student is passing as they should is probably not the strongest, only because like we're literally talking about how students are being passed through without getting what they need. So you can pass the SOLs all day long and still not actually retain or comprehend. And I think that that's what we need to be getting at somehow, whether it's this particular policy or one in the future. Like, how are we actually tracking that? I mean, because this is not a new issue, and I feel like it's improved a lot since you've been the superintendent, and I will absolutely credit that every single day. And I'm saying that this is not just a Charlottesville City Schools issue. Like, students are graduating and not reading on grade level, and that is absolutely a problem. And so I just want to make sure that like we can only control CCS. So what are we doing on our end to make sure that that is not happening? And looking at graduation rates is not going to address that, unfortunately, because we're saying that students are graduating but are not on grade level.
Yeah, no, I wasn't saying the graduation rates. I was just saying that when we talk about like, do they know the information? I mean, we have students who are taking tests online who are demonstrating that they do know the information because they've passed an assessment. And that's just one indicator. That's just one indicator. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Bryant. Ed Tech, I think we're going to dig even more into, right? I hope, but I mean, and if I may bring it back to this policy retention side, the policy is moving from one paragraph to 3 pages, which is a lot. I'm fine with more, and in my mind, this calls out more with more detail, you might say, even though we're not trying to get in a lot more detail, but a lot, I guess, expectations, if again is what we've been trying to use. There was specific, and getting back, or you know, there's been a lot of talk around 3rd grade reading scores being very important, and that's where a lot of states have said, all right, if you're not reading, and they're not using multiple, they're using one variable, I guess, or multiple variables. Can you just dig into why were they doing that, and what has been the expectations of that, and why are you not suggesting that?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's against the Code of Virginia for us to do that, to only use one criteria and to use the SOL to retain a student. Second, I think those states that we're referencing, it's a state decision, and the state testing and system around accountability is based in an expectation that students would not progress to the next grade level until they master and demonstrate that mastery on a state assessment. So, for instance, in those states that have that, it's not a local school division setting that policy and then working within constraints of a state that doesn't have parameters and a system set up to accommodate that expectation. So, for instance, often those states have multiple testing opportunities for students. You don't have to score a certain amount on the test to be able to retake it multiple times. I taught in that situation one time, and I know that, you know, the first administration of the state test was much earlier in the school year than what it is like in a state like in Virginia. They also had multiple attempts, and again, you didn't have to get a certain score to to um, to take it again. So the way our accountability system is set up, we get, you know, students receive an attempt, or if they score within a certain range, a second attempt, and in under eighth grade. So you don't, like, it's not really set up to, it would be like a one shot at sort of meeting that expectation. And again, it actually, the code pretty clearly spells it out that we can't just use that as a determining factor.
And the standards of quality require us to look at multiple criteria when determining promotion and retention.
All right, so state code, and then obviously when I read about it and the studies about it and the results about it were right. There's, you know, it's just not usually just one test. There's also other supports provided, very similar to the supports we provide also, et cetera, when we find students that are again, okay.
And they can test up into like the summer. I mean, so they start as early as February, March, and they get multiple attempts
So
to take the test.
what was whether it's working or not, what was the logic behind that third grade test and you have to pass a test? We expect more parent buy-in and accountability and fear and then they engage more, or is it, and I guess, what do you think is the logic behind it?
I think looking at some of the research to help us kind of craft this policy, that in third grade, you're kind of going from, you know, learning to read to reading to learn. And so that becomes that age where it's like, as you progress and go, you know, promoted into
So
fourth
you want to make
grade,
sure they
through
can
the
do
fifth-
that.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And the theory being it motivates the student to have a test and know they're not going to graduate. So they're going to individually maybe put more oomph into it and pay attention. And if they know they're not as a third grader, potentially going to fourth grade with their friends.
Right. Yes.
Do we have that type of built into what we're doing right now for supports? And when we think about this, I assume we do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think I know what you're saying. Do our families feel that same pressure? Is that what you're saying?
Well, right. Whether does a student or a family feel pressure, or should they feel pressure of potentially not moving forward? Or having their child move forward or the student move forward? Or are we never kind of holding that over their head and that accountability? And not that we should, I mean.
Right. Well, and I know the state that you cited, like in Mississippi. So thinking about the science of reading, so they implemented the science of reading in 2016. And so Virginia didn't have the Virginia Literacy Act. It started in 2022. And so since then, students, if you fail the SOL, like you're put on a student or a reading plan. And so looking at vowels and all the benchmarks, like making sure that we're intervening early, and also having those literacy interventions in place and targeted supports in place for students starting as early as in kindergarten. And so hopefully we are intervening before third grade and making sure that as we're promoting students, we've got those necessary supports in place. And then we're looking at multiple criteria, not just the third grade SOL.
Like, I like this new iteration of it. I just, my question, I think you to Dr. Gurley is this change anything, or you think, or not?
I mean, currently, and so what we did was we pulled data. I mean, there's students currently being retained at the lower grades. Like, I mean, we don't even have to talk about the secondary, because even though that's in that, I mean, that's not technically a promotion retention, because that's whether you fail or pass the class, I'm sorry. But I mean, I don't I don't know. Just, we are still like new in the work. We're creating the guardrails, but I mean, I think beforehand we were having general conversations that just sounded like kids just move on. We pull the data, kids aren't just moving on. There are kids who are retained. And you see, I mean, the thing that people hold us accountable for are, test scores. Well, you see how those students are performing. So I don't know that I mean, unless you're looking to retain more children, then you could figure out a way to retain more students, but I mean, children are being retained and we're providing them with the appropriate supports.
Is the retention due to parents' involvement to say, I don't feel like my child is ready to move forward? Or is it something that comes from the school to say that we believe that this child should be retained?
I don't have, we just go in and pull the number of students who've been retained. So I wouldn't want to, I wouldn't want to make an assumption on how are retained. I know that it does happen both ways. I mean, I've had conversations with principals recently about students who are, the building is recommending to be retained. And I know that there are instances, particularly at a kindergarten level, where parents are like, I would like for my child to do another year in kindergarten. So, I mean, anecdotally, we see both.
Right. And regardless, I mean, the parents are involved in the conversation
That's
along with all educators.
Yeah, but what I have seen from just like working is more of like the parents initiating the conversation, not the other way around, where the school is sitting down with the parent to say, I think it's a great idea if we hold your child back because of X, Y, and Z. It's more of like the kid has been struggling all year, and now we're to the point where the parent feels like the child should stay in that grade so that he or she don't be pushed forward. But I had another question in reference to like the attendance, and how can we kind of talk about like how that fits into like the policy of like retention in reference to, is it a time frame of like how many days a child needs to show up throughout the school year, or if they don't show up, they will be retained? Is that kind of spelled out in the policy, or is it just vague?
That would be more for like a regulation. So
Okay.
we would that would be part of like kind of the criteria and looking at like unexcused absences, and kind of going from there, but we wouldn't retain a student just for attendance issues. Because we would want to look at the whole child and look at
Okay.
multiple criteria.
I don't want us to hold more students or retain more students. Like I feel like there's a lot of good work happening. To Miss Cooper's point about like who's initiating those conversations, I guess my question ultimately is like, at what point does it stop, right? Like if there's a student who is high risk or at risk year after year after year, like at what point do we say like, clearly they're not meeting like grade level 3 years in a row? Like, I'm concerned that like, yes, scaffolding is important. And yes, having necessary supports in place is key. But if this student needs that support every single year and does not have an IEP, like, or doesn't have like, I don't know how to say this correctly. Like, I wouldn't say like a real reason, but there's just like not,
Right.
maybe it is attendance, maybe it is behavior. There's all of these things in place, like, but it's still not clicking for the third year in a row. Then I think maybe there should be more like school initiated conversations about retention that are more of like recommendations to the parents, because I don't know of many parents who are going to willingly say like, oh yeah, I just want my kid to be held back. Like,
No,
it's a pride thing. It's a cultural thing. So with that in mind, like how are those conversations being initiated with parents, and like what kind of like support are they getting to not just advocate for their student, but understand like this is necessary because your kid is falling behind 3 or 4 years in a row. Like we need to.
No, I think all of that is great feedback, Ms. Bryant. You know, I would say that we have a very good MTSS system where, you know, our teams are meeting, we are we're putting interventions and supports in place. I definitely echo that, you know, we definitely don't want students to go 3 years and, you know, you know, just blatantly struggle with no support. I can't think of an instance in Charlottesville City Schools where an educator is going to just allow a student to struggle all year. I mean, we are putting some very high dosage interventions in place, and and we are we're seeing, like, is there a pattern of strengths and weaknesses? What's the response to interventions? I mean, it's a heavy lift, and I think that most of our educators, I'm going to say all of our educators, because we have high expectations for our educators, but you know, we're expecting them to get in, do these things with fidelity. I mean, and we're, doing root cause analysis, like what's going on. And sometimes the things that we're in place, sometimes the things that we're putting in place, we are putting those systems and structures to support the students in the classroom, but we also are putting these things in place to try to address some of the things that are happening in the home. And so some things are happening concurrently, and that's why, and through a lot of the conversations that we have, that many times when you see our students who are economically disadvantaged, why it's taking them so much longer to catch up, because the system just is not built for them. And that's the system that we're trying to build here, particularly as we try to address, like, we're definitely not teaching to test, but that's always the thing that we're held accountable for. So we're making progress in those areas, but it's always like it's compounding when we talk about some of our learners who are struggling the most. It's like they're struggling here, they're struggling at home, and we're expecting teachers to, not saying that you all are, but like it feels like the accountability system is expecting teachers to address all of those things. So no, I don't think that anyone is, I mean, I will say that teachers have said, and people who have said in this room have, I mean, the feel is like, well, because the student is not, then right, we need more students to be retained. And I don't think that that's the message. And I don't want that to be the message that we are sending out to our community. Be, but I mean, to put anything, other things in place, we would not be equitably addressing the needs of our students, because you're just talking about a lot of classrooms of retained Black students.
Yeah, no, I get that, but
Yeah.
I like, and that's why I'm saying I am confident that the educators are doing everything they can. And I'm like, we see right now, even like your staff is sitting here, like, I know they're doing the work to try their best. And I'm saying that, like, if we need to retain more students, I would be in support of that. And like, I'm sure the community, people will have their opinions of that. I mean, that's natural. But at the same time, like, we will pay, there are real life consequences when students are passed through and they do not have the tools that they need to make real decisions as young people or as adults. Like, and the community will pay for it in other ways, if not per pupil spending and retaining them in school. So I'm just saying, in this space and on the record, like, maybe there need to be more students who are retained so that we can, like, and then that gets into the question of, like, okay, so what happens when they're retained another year? Like, what, and maybe there are things that we cannot solve for
Yeah.
that are outside of the school's purview. But at the same time, like, I don't know any other way. Like, right now, I think that's one way that we can help students not continue to graduate without basic skills that they need.
Yeah.
And I would say I 100% agree with that. Just because, if a kid is not reading on grade level, and say if they're in third grade and they're not reading on grade level and we pass them to the fourth grade, the curriculum only gets harder. And so if I can't read third grade curriculum, how am I going to read fourth grade curriculum? And yes, there are interventions in place, but like you said, there are other factors. It could be home, it could be community, other factors that could be, or it could be a parent that struggles with the same thing because they will also push through the system and don't have the skills to support their child at home. And so I think we need to take some of those things in consideration when we're able to identify early that a child is struggling in these areas. And maybe, I'm not saying that we hold all our children back, but what I don't want to see is that we continue to push our children along without the skills that they need to be successful.
Yeah, and sorry, you bring up a great point because early identification, that's what all the research supports. Like, so when we looked at all the research and the meta-analysis around retention, and looking at 84 studies, 22 studies, that it truly, there could be short-term gains, but the long-term effects from retention, especially like retaining students more than once, I mean, it definitely, has negative outcomes for students and the dropout rate. And so what all the research does support, though, is what you said, the early identification, targeted instructional supports, and making sure that, when we go through that MTSS process, like if the intervention is not, if they're not responding to the intervention, then we need to change the intervention and look at our progress measures and make sure that when we are promoting students with supports, that we have the right supports in place to meet the needs of those students.
I do think maybe it's not just retention, but I know this year we're limited in our summer school capacity with reconfiguration and building movement, but wonder if there's an element of this for a more robust summer school opportunity. I mean, time is the only thing that we can, like, time is what we're working against and what we're working with. And so if retention, maybe they don't meet the criteria for retention, but if we had a more robust summer school program that, can give the opportunity of time, I think that's worth a discussion as well. And I think echoing Ms. Bryant, Ms. Cooper, just literacy is the pathway out of poverty. It is a basic human right. And if we do not get that right, we continue to perpetuate what we are working against. And this may be our only opportunity. And I think what we saw during the Black Student Achievement data review was that when Dr. Gurley came and implemented some really strong, robust programs and processes, our children in grades K through 6, 7 are excelling, and they are making gains. I think the concern is these, how do we then work in the 8 through 12 space? Again, maybe not with retention, understanding that retention in older grades does lead to higher dropout rates, and that's certainly not what we want to go for. But how do we do this in a way that I think fosters hope for some of these students that they don't know what else is out there, because it's all they know. All they know is what they see at home or what they see in these pockets of the community that they're in. So I think that is our mission should be to provide that opportunity out of poverty. And how do we change the narrative and change the conversation? So I appreciate.
Right.
comments.
And that's kind of our push in this policy is for the summer programming. Because I know one of the articles that you shared, it cited that, interventions, high dosage tutoring and summer programs. So that was kind of the push for the middle school because yes, when you retain in middle school, it's clear in the research
Right.
that you will see higher dropout rates among those students.
And I think the walk program having we've got some really exciting things happening there. I'm looking forward to the new leadership in that space and what that might look like. We have Dr. Trotter coming into his new roles. I think there are a lot of really wonderful things like right at our doorstep. And so I hope that, if we can couple that with some of these other policy and then family education opportunities, that this is what we are going to do. And how do we help your family navigate this policy in a way that helps your child is the next conversation, I think. So, thank you.
Real, go ahead.
Just say real quick, I do like that we added the section to with students and disabilities and English language learners to differentiate them, which wasn't in there before, if I understand that correctly.
Yep.
And then I also, again, getting into some of my, I think colleagues' concerns here that we'll have notice requirements now for possible retention to parents. I like that that's explicit in there, which could have been, I think, part of our regulation before, maybe, but that it is now part of the policy. I like that also. Thank you.
Ms. Dooley?
I like all of those things, but I think this is way too much policy. Like most of this, I think, should be back on the regulation side. I don't know if there's any appetite for that. Like really the first 3 paragraphs to me read like our policy. And then promotion and retention on is the articulation of the regulation.
I hear what you're saying. I think I'm concerned that if it's not boldly all spelled out in the policy, that we get into like battles about what is being regulated equitably and what is not. I think it's better to have a little bit more in this case.
I feel like we could say that
about
for most policies, and then we end up with the regulation in the policy, which is what we're trying to clearly delineate, like what is our charge to Dr. Gurley to then implement. And so I recognize I am only one of 7, but I feel like we are creating an exception to our delineation of policy versus regulation on this document that is not consistent throughout our other policies. Mr. Myers rolling his eyes over there.
I know, no, I mean, I appreciate that perspective. I mean, I think there was conversation around wanting to see more. So I do want to acknowledge.
And I do want to see more. Like, I think this is the conversation, right? But this
No, but that-
is getting in the weeds.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great reminder. So I wanted to say thank you for that. If I may, real quickly, I just had a question about the students, the numbers of students who were retained. I didn't know if you just had off the top of your head, like were they K through 6 as far as the breakdown of were they earlier grades?
Right. So we looked at K through 6. I mean, high school, obviously based on credit, but at the K6 level, the majority was K through 3.
Okay. Which is what we would want and hope for. Any sense of, just to Ms. Cooper's question, teacher or school recommendation versus the parent request?
I don't have that information.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. But that's good to hear. No, I appreciate that, Ms. Dooley. I think we should probably think about that a little bit and look at this some more. Mr. Myers, I know, I see you down there. I mean, ultimately, I have a question for you. So you've brought this up multiple times, and I was just curious. So what was your ask or your hope out of this policy discussion and wanting to see it potentially changed? Did you have kind of an end game ask or thought around this?
Well, I don't think it was just me. I think Miss Cooper, and correct me if I'm wrong, Miss Burns, and
I'm not trying to put
put
you on the hot
So
seat, but
share concern here. I mean, I was interested in what I asked about this 3rd grade kind of more hard cutoff. Like, does that make sense? And and interrogate that question for our students, based on the resources we have, the student dynamic makeup we have, et cetera. After doing further research, and I am and again, I think what the staff has presented, like, I feel better about this. I understand, excuse me. So in my mind, yes, I know, I think we've interrogated it, which was part of what I wanted to do, which we hadn't been doing, and we've been talking about doing and through right now. And again, what the staff has done, I think we've interrogated it, and I think we have in my mind, excuse me, anymore, a clear set of expectations that are delineated in this new proposed policy that staff has put forth to us. That still, I think, gets us and achieves what at least my goal is, and not to my colleagues, but is ensuring that our children are, again, getting the skills they need as they progress, and then again, able to then further education. So I think this policy is achieving, well, I think we've done the work, excuse me, or at least interrogated it. And in my mind, I've seen this in the result here, at least if this is what everybody else supports, but I'm in favor of this. Achieved what I wanted to do. Thank you for asking, Chair.
Dr. Gurley, with some of the feedback here, right, recent, I mean, would you consider, what are your thoughts about some of that moving to regulation?
I mean, I do-
because in looking at the regulation, it's very different.
Right. I do think that based on the VSBA recommendation, that there's too much there. I mean, I think it is the how. I mean, I think we can all agree on it's the how. And the how it should be in the regulation.
And so you would be comfortable, I mean, if it was the will of the board, I mean, to flip that other stuff into the regulation?
Mhm.
Yeah. And to be clear, there's not a VSBA model policy for promotion and retention, just if you were wondering.
I have a question. Was this compared to any districts that do have policies on retention?
Yes, we looked at multiple divisions across the state.
Would it be possible in a follow-up to have those sent to us, just who you reviewed?
All the divisions that we reviewed.
Thank you. A list of those. So
Would everybody like those?
if everyone would like.
Yeah,
I mean, enough,
you.
okay.
What they are, just for
Thank-
comparison.
And I have the research that we looked at as well, so I can share that.
Yeah, I get why this is teetering the edge of regulation. At the same time, though, being that retention has been brought up consistently over, I don't know, the past year and a half, like in board member comments, I think that this is good, and I would not want to see this folded just into regulation. I think it needs to be spelled out. It's definitely a persistent issue, and it's a very serious one. And I think, especially when you're talking about parents and their involvement in retention and things of that nature, I think it needs to be spelled out very clearly, so that when we're talking about who's responsible for what and we're talking about who should be accountable for what, then we have a policy that we can clearly point to that is standardized. And so when we talk about what is the community's role, what are community partners, all of those things, I think a policy is really helpful for like streamlining and regulating that work.
I also, were any teachers, students, or parents consulted on the policy?
We looked the policy in ELT, and then we brought meeting.
Probably need that one. It's going dead. It's going dead.
Is this one working?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay. So we brought it to ELT, and then to the principals meeting, we looked at it there, and then to our all the coordinators.
Okay. I just, we sent out a survey about crowdfunding and gathered more information on that, but I feel like retention is such a huge topic with big implications. And part of the reason I have continuously brought this up for 3 years is because I've heard from teachers mostly in the high school about how difficult it is to teach because children can't read and they are generally correct. So maybe it's 1, maybe it's 7, I don't know, but generally. And so I just like wonder about that engagement, like I know it's the end of
And
the
I think-
year, so we probably don't.
I think it's more of the comprehension piece. It's not that they can't read,
There
it's
we
the
go. Thank you.
comprehension. So like,
Thank
can they tell you what they read after they read it is the issue. And it's a huge issue. It's
Right, because what's the point of reading if you don't know what you read? So, I mean, like, um, that's, I think that further underscores why we need all of this spelled out in this way. But since VSBA does not have an example retention policy, I mean, I think we can make our decision, and I don't think we need to be like worried that it's going too far if we don't even have an example of what goes.
I think that was just an FYI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
we approve regulations also, right?
No.
No. Okay.
No, and
Yes.
not to be, I don't even know what the word would be, flip about this. You know, I mean, we have had this conversation or have been asking to have it, expressing our desire. Thus, we are here. Thus, this work was done. So I appreciate that. And I think having the opportunity to voice this, I don't think I recall anyone ever disputing, you know, the fact that any student, a student, a couple of students, a few students struggling to read or unable to comprehend what they're reading in high school is not a concern. I think everybody has acknowledged that. I think, I mean, just this is just my opinion. You know, Dr. Gurley has put a charge out to staff in the school division, and we know this, and we know this is a concern. And I think there are reading plans, and I think there are interventions. Is it hard to capture and make up that progress? You know, when you're looking at a junior, a sophomore, freshman, yeah, it is. But I personally, I think the staff are doing what they can do to support those students. So I don't know that, I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to say. I just, you know, other than the fact that it has been acknowledged, so nobody is not saying that that isn't a concern, or that we've been ignoring it. It's just now that it's here, and I think we're doing good work, and the staff is doing good work, and I tend to agree with Ms. Dooley as far as just the policy piece and reminding us of where we need to be, and just because all of this isn't explicitly written in the policy doesn't mean this division isn't committed to doing that work.
But I think, like, and I agree with everything that's being said. And at the same time, I just want to add that, like, good intentions and a few people acknowledging things does not change the reality. And so, like, I know that everyone's doing the work and, like, trying their best. And I think that is a bigger reason why we need a policy that explicitly states these things, because it is such, like, reading has been for Black students a problem for generations in this division. Dr. Gurley has been doing the work and we appreciate it, and policies will last beyond any of our tenure. So at the same, unless it's changed or, you know, like modified. But I think, like, we need to keep that in mind too. Like, it's bigger than just like acknowledging that like work is being done. I think we need very clear expectations, which is the goal of this. And I think that this version of the policy states those expectations. So I would like to see it remain the same. Again, I'm only one person, but.
And again, I don't mean to disagree either, but again, it's expectations I think we can share those, but then it's the how it's being implemented. And again, that's regulation.
I think it's also telling, if we look at the policy, it hasn't been revised since 2008. Like, that's the gap. That's the data gap that we continue to look at and talk about. We haven't revised it since 2008. So
Is that because it's not a VSBA one that like comes up periodically? Is that why
Well-
it hasn't been revised?
Right,
So it
yes.
hasn't been
And then,
preempted?
and Dr. Odie was working on it,
Okay.
last year for, and so, and then when we presented that policy, it was not approved. And so then this year we've been working on it. So we have been working on it for a couple years now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think at least it has to have something about um the notice of requirements for possible retention of parents. I think that's essential. And I mean, it hasn't been revised since 2008. So like, and we do not approve regulations. So like, what are we, I guess what I'm trying to understand is like, what are we proposing if we don't approve this? What are folks thinking that we should
Well,
do?
and so so after going to the policy workshop, so just because it's in regulation and you all don't approve it, doesn't mean that it's not a legal binding document. So it is still considered policy. So if it's in the regulation, like it's still, we're still legally bound to it.
Right, the board just doesn't have a say over it though, so.
No, but we have oversight. We
You
can
have
look at
oversight.
that. It's attached to the policy and we can come back. And if they're not following up with the regulation, then that's where we step in.
But it's still considered policy.
Okay.
I mean, someone drafted this from staff. I guess based on feedback and some of the feedback we've given you already. I mean, again, I asked Dr. Gurley earlier, is this going to be problematic or change things? And you said, I don't think it really would. I mean, what were you, I assume you wrote it in a way that you thought would be implementable and not, again, have any conflicts. There's references to, again, the various state code, et cetera, right? So.
Right. Yeah. Well, we took what Dr. Odie was working on and then, which was actually much longer than what you're seeing here. And just kind of took out some of the redundancy and then looked at some of the research, wanted to make sure, because when you create policy, we still want to make sure we're following and we're in line with code and regulations. And then standards of quality requires that the school board have a policy on promotion and retention. So we wanted to make sure all those pieces were in this policy.
Okay, so, but would staff recommend this policy?
I don't see why not.
Yeah, I mean, it's
think-
implementable.
Because we are going to look at the whole child. I mean,
Right.
and run through our MTSS process as issues come up.
Yeah, I guess I just thinking about process and Ms. Dooley and the bigger questions here, but not just related to this, but I mean, I would hope when we're seeing draft policy that is coming from staff, it is something that you think is implementable and
yes.
you want to do.
And I think, I mean, we're all former teachers as
Right.
well. And so when we looked at it as ELT, we brought it to all the principals. We got a lot of feedback from the principals as well as our content coordinators, our literacy coordinator, our math coordinator. And we got feedback from all of our instructional leadership in the division.
Right. So, well, I mean, again, based on that, then the colleagues, I think this has been vetted
And
from
research.
staff, right? And again, we challenged you, I think, all to, again, do some other things with it. Like, I feel pretty good about this. Thanks.
I think so too. I mean, if we keep saying we want to protect staff time, I think we should make use of what they're spending their time drafting for us. The only, I think, thing that I would, after looking closely with Ms. Burns, is that like a substantial body of research indicates that grade retention is not effective intervention for improving long-term academic outcomes and may increase the risk of disengagement and dropping out. I actually am not sure that that's like helpful for the policy specifically, but I don't know if y'all just added it for context and just like.
So I agree with taking out substantial. I
Yeah.
do think leaving in the research, because we did look at a lot of research and then I would cite it like in a footnote.
I think that's better. Yeah. Thank you so much.
But I agree with that
Mhm.
change.
Yeah, I just thank y'all for taking the time to do this. I would like to use it because you spent so much time doing it.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant.
I would ask for in that same area, if you're removing the word substantial, indicates that grade retention alone is not effective intervention. Because I think that is what the research says, that if it is a standalone intervention, it is not helpful. It is MTTS, like it's all the other things coupled. So I would ask respectfully to add alone. Thank you.
And I do want to go back to in the very beginning, Ms. Burns, just to point out, you made reference to each student should learn. So in that, oh, okay, because it was crossed out, right? Okay, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
I forgot. I made myself a note and I was like, oh, let me go
Thank
back.
you. New policy addresses that concern. Thank you for asking. All right, we will move on to the next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Lost my place. Ed Tech.
Yeah, hey, everybody. I'm shifted over here tonight. Just going to try to give a brief overview. You'll notice right off at the top of this, under discussion ed tech policy, there's no sub-bullet because there exists no CCS policy at this time for ed tech screen time limitations, ed tech use. There are some model, what they call quote unquote guidelines from Virginia. There are a few states that have started to begin implementing screen time. The biggest one in the news is the Los Angeles USD. They passed a resolution. The board deemed that it was an important enough topic and they are spending time to draft policy. But the historical side of technology has typically revolved around the regulations of laws of what can be presented, what needs to be filtered, and what needs to be included or not included. So those laws and rules that we abide by right now are typically related to acceptable use policy, which is how students make acceptable and appropriate choices with the device in hand. We've created generative AI policy and regulation, which limits the ways in which students have access to generative AI. We embed a lot of those responsibilities into the students' rights and responsibilities, which again is a long list of things students have as expectations for computer use. We're bound by certain national codes, SIPA, which is a Children's Internet Protection Act, that is requirement for us to provide filters on all school devices. So I was saying earlier, we use programs like ClassWise and LineWise, which allow us to see into what students are doing. It allows teachers to provide restrictions. It allows them to pause internet, reduce their experience to a single website, which I will speak as an advocate has been a wonderful tool. There's an extension of that called Custodio. We did some preliminary communications earlier in the year that would allow any devices that go home that are owned and maintained by CCS for parents to put a pause all internet or set time limits or set restrictions at home in addition to their own expectations. A neat thing about Custodio is that it also allows parents to take one personal device. So it could be a cell phone for a student and add that device to the Custodio interface, which gives, again, just ways for parents to support at home, use for devices at home. The other piece is COPPA, C-O-P-P-A, which is an online privacy protection. That's just about protecting student data. Again, these are all of when students have devices, these are the things that come into play. I will acknowledge what Ms. Horn said today. The book, The Digital Delusion, is indeed worth investigating. It is one source of information. I want to be very clear that Dr. Horvath doesn't say no screens, no technology, ever, ever, ever. It is more of we need to find what works. And as educators, we all are striving for what's the best practice for this experience. And there are instances where in-person paper pencil experiences are the best. And I think that if we do further surveys to staff and to students and educate everybody on best practices, we will find a nice balance of where technology might be the best answer and where technology might be not the best answer. Being a technology director does not take away that I was formerly a teacher myself and a principal and a building administrator for a number of years. I have always asked that same question: how do students learn best? And when we hit COVID in 2020, I think we learned a pretty big lesson that technology is not always the best way to do things, but sometimes it's the only access we have, and we got to do our best with what we have. For Charlottesville City Schools, I would say there's two types of device access points that I want to talk about today. And again, this is kind of like knowledge fill, so I apologize if it gets a little boring, but it's important to have a little background knowledge. The two types of device issues that we give for students, I call them off and away, which means the device starts in a computer cart. And then the other one is a carry model, where students carry their devices throughout the day. And then those either have a take-home expectation or a stay-at-school expectation. So my philosophy, based on what I've learned over the last few years, is let's try to move to a off and away, and where possible, keep it home. Now, any choice that we make with either of those is going to have unintended consequences if we're not prepared for, if kids are expected to take a device home to complete work and we just pull that device out of their ecosystem, we need to have a plan for a substitution model. And so I will say right now, for this upcoming school year, a couple of big changes that are on that philosophy of mine and others who I think will support it is the off and away. Computers are in a cart. They start in a cart and they are accessed when teachers deem the instruction is best, when technology takes the front seat. So right now that model is currently in place for grades K through 4. Preschool next year, I'll just start out. Preschool next year, there's no intention of a student-used device. That's just the model that Dr. Korb and I have settled on. The kindergarten through 5th grade model would be a device in carts, off and away. And right now, Walker is 5th, 6th, so 5th and 6th grade, they have carts, but they take their device out in the morning. They carry it around throughout the day. They put it in the cart at the end of the day. So moving through K-5 for this next year, moving to that off and away philosophy, all elementary schools will have the device starting in a cart and away, and the teacher would make the decision and determination of when those devices would need to come out for best instruction. For middle school, currently middle school in 7, 8, they take their devices home and they bring them to school. There is no cart. There is no off and away cart for students to put that device at the end of the day. Dr. Thompson and I have had extensive conversations. I had planned on rolling out, we'll move 6th grade to an off and away model, and then the second year of the full implementation of the middle school, 7th grade would be off and away, then 8th grade off and away. After long conversations with her and some knowledge from reading some books, we agreed we were going to try, if it was fiscally responsibly able to do, is to start all of the middle school as an off and away, devices stay home. We are able to implement that model for the fall of 2026. So she and I have had lengthy discussions with teachers. We've had lengthy discussions with needs, going everything from A to Z. If we do this model in the fall, what's needed and what our unintended consequences are. The data that she shared with me was predominantly in favor of let's do off and away for grades 6, 7, and 8. Let's take those computers. Let's leave them in school all day. Let's start them in carts. Let's provide each classroom space, each learning space with computers in carts. And at the end of each class, let's put those devices away so kids are no longer using the carry model. She felt and I felt that it would be a best mindset for middle schoolers. And then those devices would not go home. And there's nuances to that. You know, we have to solve some problems for children who are taking certain classes that may require work at home on a computer. But the predominant model for middle school next year will be devices off and away, no carry model, just keep it in the cart and teachers will use it. And that brings us to high school. High school right now is still devices issued, devices used throughout the day. They have the carry model. That is a very big piece of pie to bite in a single year. I think that deems a lot of conversation. There are a lot of college level courses, AP courses. There's a lot of unintended consequences of us drawing like a really hard line in the sand. But I think just initially off the bat, we're philosophically moving to like an off and away kind of model. And I will note that it's not under my purview specifically, but there was a Virginia law passed, and I just want to pull it up for reference. It's HB 1486. I think this is Virginia's first attempt at trying to get it right beyond saying best practices. It amends Virginia code to include instruction concerning time spent using electronic devices, such as computers and cell phones and other smart devices. And it showcases the addictive potential thereof, that we shall provide, by the public schools will provide instruction as prescribed by the board. So that goes to kind of your mental health and your wellness capabilities. There will be a component added to that, where an instructional component of teaching children about the addictive nature of screens, which I think would support some of the limitation we're seeing. Their studies have shown that screen times can be addictive. Screen times can be distracting to learning. Screen times can be disruptive, and screen times cannot be always the best choice for various learning activities. All that said, I would love to have feedback from the board, and I've had long discussions with Dr. Gurley and Dr. Isley. We all have copies of that digital delusion book. It's a great centerpiece for things that we should consider. But yeah, I mean, I'm a tech guy. I have a daughter who just graduated high school. I'm thrilled that she does not use the computer as much. I'm thrilled that my fourth grader doesn't use the computer so much. But I think for a policy standpoint, there is no policy. And based on Dr. Gurley's presentation tonight, I'd be greatly curious to hear the board's perspective on that policy standpoint. If a formal statement would like to be considered as, let's take a moment and talk about ed tech. And let's see if there is some work. My proposal when I was talking to Mr. Meyer and Dr. Gurley was, hey, let's get this right. Let's take the time and involve our stakeholders. Let's send out those surveys. Let's gather that research. Let's make sure our teachers know. Let's educate everybody on these negatives. Let's educate people on the positives. Let's hear what they have to say. And if there's a policy that's deemed for screen time restriction, it would be my absolute pleasure to work on regulations to help define it. It's new. It's not required by the state, so there's no special code yet. If you look across the country, the Los Angeles School District put a resolution in place. States like Iowa and Oklahoma are starting it. There are 2 or 3 divisions now that are presenting, hey, we need to limit screen time. But I will say, when I look at our current practices for technology, and this will be the last thing I'll say, I've already taken my 3 minutes. So I will say that when I look at the LA school district, who's supposed to be like super progressive and like we are just dropping the hammer down, their bullet points are pre-K through first grade. They have a ban on a district issued device except for required assessments. We don't have too many big requirements for little guys to be using the computers. And we're not banning, but we're not using preschool devices. Second and third grade, they have a maximum of 20 minutes per day outside of assessments. our instructional components are 15 to 30 minutes a day anyway, in our current state. Fourth and fifth grade, a max of 30 per day. I think we're somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes a day as a requirement. Again, it's how teachers choose to use it versus the requirements. And then 6th through 12th grade, there's just non-mandatory recommended limits. So we think this is best practice, but we're not going to stop you. And we're already saying grade 6 through 8, we're going to have devices off and away. We're not taking them home unless there's a really prescribed need. And like I said, 9th through 12th, it's not a conversation I'm prepared to have tonight. But and also they say video content prohibits students-led use of YouTube and video streaming. We already do that. Our default posture is YouTube off, games off. If a teacher feels it's a deemed need, they have to go into the program and unblock it. And when that class ends, that rule expires and the kids are back to no access to YouTube in the classroom. But with all those thoughts and a really blank bullet point under that slide related to ed tech policy, I mean, I welcome the discussion. I lean on Dr. Gurley and Dr. Isley or educational experts to lend insight into these pieces. But I mean, I'm here to say there's no ed tech policy on screen limits. I presented what I think is a good division philosophy on the direction we're heading. And yeah, I pass the mic back to the board and for the discussion that this is meant to be.
Mr. Meyer.
Well, colleagues, and thank you, Pat. I am heartened to hear about the changes that are going to be implemented next year. You know, what we don't have here is policy language, colleagues, which is, I think at this moment is fine with me, based on kind of what I think I'm hearing is being proposed by the leadership team. Yeah, so what I would hope is that by this time next year, our goal would be to have more explicit policy language based on the learnings of the year. Again, my preference, and if I understanding again, kind of the analysis at the moment in the studies is that less is, we should not be using screens a lot in general.
Yeah, I think the ed tech world of, the drill and kill and the gaming atmosphere to successfully complete a problem is deemed to have limitations. And online screen reading has a definite time constraint of, I think it's about 5 minutes. After 5 minutes of digitally reading online, that content retention, I think, as Bryant was talking about it, that transfer of knowledge from, hey, I did this on a computer, but when I go to put it in the real world, it's not happening the way it's supposed to. But I also want to be clear, there are adaptive programs that have proven to be very, very successful. But yes, the screen time in general, when it's used for ed tech, let's do these points and get 1,000 points. The old Oregon Trail is like that old example where it's fun to play and you advance your levels, but I'll reference Duolingo, but when you take it to Guatemala on a mission trip, you may find out that you didn't quite remember as much as you thought you would by playing a game, with an owl for 30 minutes a day.
Yeah, so the only thing I would like to say is I think, again, not like to, but Pat, you outlined, I think, some new changes, and I'd like to see us communicate those changes to the public if that's what, again, the rest of the board is interested in, also colleagues. But so that we make sure parents understand that, and again, obviously you communicate to all the staff, but so that folks know about it, and then, we're all going through this together and can provide input as we go forward. Thank you.
Operational changes. Mr. Cuomo, if you could share that ed tech, I mean, I know it's not in it's a lot of it is kind of shorthand, but so that the board can have for reference, like work that's already been done, that the document that talks about current and future alignment.
Sure. Yeah, I can share that.
Thank you. I think for the high school, so for 9th through 12th grade, being on the screens, I think it's bigger than just like social media or the thoughts about like YouTube. There's also doom scrolling on like news sites. Like there are students who sit in your AP Gov or whatever class and they're, oh, I'm just on, CNN. And they're like not paying attention to class. I think that that's equally as like dangerous for like retention of actual content in the class. Um, but also like a lot of undergraduate courses, as we talk about like preparation for beyond high school, a lot of undergrad classes have a no tech policy. Like I sat in quite a few of them. It's recommended that we take paper notes. Like, and I was like, oh, I didn't really do this at all in my AP classes. And now I'm being expected to do it as a college student. So, I mean, I think that's important to think about too, how like universities are also being reactive to the issues and the trends that they're seeing around lack of like comprehension and retention of information, and thus creating like no technology in my class at all type of policies. And I don't think that that's a bad idea. I know that like we need more time to like try this out and see how it goes, but I don't want us to like try to get too granular because again, regulation versus policy. But I do think it would be interesting to see how those more writing based courses could benefit from like having a like no tech policy at all, and see what teachers think about that. How much are they using it for instruction? Would be really helpful for us to make to do more on ed tech policy as a board.
Yeah, I think the data's out there, and like you said, well, I said earlier, that's a beast of a cookie to eat, but there are studies worth educating staff members about. Feedback, like you said, you yourself as a student may have noticed that in your experience, having a computer was not the best way for you to receive instruction. I will advocate for class-wise and line-wise if devices are used. I will advocate for the continued training of that program, because it does with a push of a button. If you don't have a place to store the cards, you can push a button and all those devices are done, and the teacher can work on expectations. But it's not a simple problem to solve. But there are some great tools while we're working towards fundamental shifts in what we might be doing over the next year or so. There are fundamental tools that teachers can use that have told me directly, this is the best tool. If I have to use a computer, I can significantly reduce that doom scrolling, that distraction, like your 25% or more distractibility with kids going where they want. That lockdown of that screen or pause of that internet can really help focus, can be a tool for a teacher to help focus students. So, yeah.
We're also spending a lot of money on textbooks, as we should, because it's a school division. But I just want to say, like, it would be nice to know how often teachers are using those in the classroom versus like technology like computers. And you may not like know that right now, obviously, but like it would be worth surveying teachers about that, because like we just discussed like a new AP textbook for AP African American history. So like this is a substantial, investment we're making. Are students actually using them? Like, are they being expected to only use them at home? Like those types of things would be helpful to know too, just so we're not continuing to like invest in, maybe we get the digital version or something like that if students are spending more times on their laptops. I think like as we think about budget and stuff like that, all of that matters, as well as like the policy and the regulation.
That did make me think, as we're thinking about the budget conversation, how do we fold all of these things? I'm looking to Ms. Samolchik. Like, how do we fold all of these things into like one comprehensive thing? And just because we've talked a lot about surveys, but then we get feedback, and it's kind of generally speaking, but it's anecdotally too, we get a lot of feedback about the survey fatigue. And so like, how can we maybe use some of this as like a budgeting tool, to your point, use it as a, how we spend money on textbooks, and what was the one earlier? When we were, oh, Yep, the resources for the classes. So if we can kind of align these things into one priority as we roll into the budget, so that we don't we're not surveying people about like 6 different things and getting a very low response rate.
And like also if we don't need a surveyor, we just want like a focus group of teachers, like, or I don't know how that, I mean, it doesn't have to be like every teacher responds to this. We could just, I guess,
No,
get the
I
feedback.
think your point about the survey is a good one. I mean, because, consequently, if we don't survey everyone, then people will feel like their voice wasn't heard in the sample that we picked. So, I mean, so yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Burns, do you have any thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Cuomo. Appreciate your work on this topic. It is clearly of interest to all of us here on the board. Look forward to reviewing the document that Dr. Gurley mentioned this evening. I do wonder if we could be working on a proposed resolution for the House Bill 1486 for us to have a resolution on ed tech policy, just reinforcing our commitment to that as part of this work. I don't know.
I think that requires, that requires conversation from you all. I mean, I think what Mr. Cuomo said is like, we're moving in that direction. So it sounds like you want a resolution that then would have a subsequent policy. I mean,
Mhm.
so it's 2 things.
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Richardson, are you there? I feel like I not intentionally forgetting you.
No, I'm here. I'm taking it all in. Thanks.
Do you have any thoughts or comments that you'd like to share around ed tech?
No,
Okay. All right. Thank you. Ms. Cooper?
So before we move, to the resolution part, I think you all would need to share with Ms. Torres by X date what you want to see, what you want to have resolved, so that it can be pulled together.
HB, yeah, I looked at it too. All right, thank you. Ms. Cooper, do you have any thoughts?
I don't.
Okay, Ms. Dooley, no. Thank you for your work, Mr. Como. I appreciate that. I think that's a great starting point that I'm supportive of. I've been intrigued from the get-go, when one of our educators who was here with us tonight has shared their screen-free classroom and just the results of that. And I am in support of, even piloting that or trying to get more teachers on board with doing something like that. If for nothing, what I'm not, the benefit to me, I mean, as shared, was just phenomenal as far as just the interaction, the student to student engagement, and the ability to turn and work with each other on first drafts, and then relying on technology for editing and those types of things and research support. I just think those skills are skills that we all need more of and we need not to lose. So however we can build that into the middle school, high school, as the students get older, I would be in support of that. And that's it. Thank you.
And the last thing, that we had up here was KNAJ, relations with law enforcement. And I think the MOU speaks clearly to this, but
I know that we received some feedback about that one in an email because the policy, I think, stated once every 2 years maybe, and then the MOU is annually. So I didn't know if the board wanted to discuss, do you want to change the language in
Ye-
that? in the
Yeah, thank
policy?
you. No, I think I brought that to your attention just in working so closely with the MOU. I mean, I am in support, especially now, of continuing to review that annually. And would I'm in support of asking the rest of the board if you're supportive of that so that we can align the language.
I would be in agreement. Yeah.
It's the same.
Any other? Yeah, Ms. Dooley. She nodded. I saw that.
Just to, sorry, I think I'm happy with that. Okay, so it is, sorry, I was trying to find the modification. Okay. And in practical terms, it is the administration and Dr. Gurley reviewing that with the team, or is it all of us reviewing? I mean, this is beyond the reports that we should be getting, et cetera, right?
There's the reporting, but there's also three meetings that are just required for review of the program review, and that can include board representatives, up to two. And then there's the reports to the entire board that would be given throughout the course of the program. The quarterly, at a minimum, there'll be like the written reports that are the quarterly data. We're still trying to get that settled with CPD. It'll be on your, it is, I've been told as of today, because I checked in on it again, that it'll be available to go with your June meeting agenda, the first quarter report. They're trying to make sure that they get the format and the data exactly right so that it's repeatable each quarter and making sure it's apples to apples with the additional data that's been requested.
And the current language that's highlighted in red, that's from, just to clarify, like that's from the VSBA model policy. So that's why we left it there. But we can change that to reflect our current MOU to annually.
Yeah, and the VSBA language says at least every 2 years, but you're correct. Yeah, it makes it in perfect alignment if it just goes ahead and spells it out annually. It's not contradictory, but it'll be more consistent to go ahead and change it.
Mr. Meyer, was your question answered?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, concerns? Ms. Richardson?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, sir? Nope. All right. So we are now moving forward to comments from the board. So if we would like to offer any, I'll start down here with Ms. Dooley. You have any comments?
No, just reiterating the praise for last night's graduation celebration. I was particularly impressed with the student speeches. And just, this is, as I said last time, the best time of the year. So love all the celebrations. And I know it's a lot of chaos for teachers wrapping up the school year. So my gratitude as you wrap up, finish out a very successful school year. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Cooper?
Don't have a lot. Just kind of want to give a shout out to all of the teachers that is doing an amazing job in our district. Thanks for all of the hard work with working with all of our students. Congratulations to all of our graduates. And hope everybody have a great and safe summer.
Thank you. Ms. Richardson, any comments from you?
Yeah, I really appreciate the presentation tonight, and especially the dialogue you guys had. I enjoy hearing you guys go back and forth and just asking the questions and trying to get to the center of the things that we need to get to when it comes to our students. I'm excited to participate in Charlottesville Middle School's graduation. So that's on my to-do list. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Hope you feel better. Ms. Burns?
Thank you for the policy dialogue this evening. Much appreciated and the work that went into that. I know we continue to dig in and ask sometimes difficult questions, but really appreciate the work on behalf of our students and the community that we're here to do the work for. Again, echo sentiments of just grateful and thankful for all the work our teachers are doing and our students are doing to get in those last minute assignments, make sure those are in. my child included. To be talked about another day. And just really want to finish the school year strong and thank you all for your work and look forward to our upcoming meeting we have scheduled on June the 1st as a school board, just how we are going to lean in and work together to talk about policy as a board and how we govern and how we work together. So just look forward to that next conversation. Thank you.
Ms. Bryant.
Yeah, graduation was amazing last night. Thank you to all of the staff that's present here and not for all of the work that you do. Thank you to the retirees who continue to come back and serve the division in all the ways that they do when called upon. And thank you, special shout out to the teachers who are doing all of the work that they're doing with night school at Lugo McGinnis Academy. It was really special last night to see students walk across the stage who have faced a lot of challenges and who are extremely resilient. And to know some of those stories and to see those students walk across the stage, it was honestly like such a moving and powerful experience. We have some really resilient and brilliant and compassionate students. It was great to see how many students clapped after their peers were walking across and during and after the speeches. If we all paid attention to the things that were said, there were some really moving statements about just like how inclusive Charlottesville High School is, how welcoming our school division and our city is, and how so many people are able to get another chance in this city. Those who come from other countries and cultures and those who are here within Charlottesville, born and raised. I mean, there's so many stories that we saw on display last night, and I think that's really powerful. But I also want to say, like, I know this week there was a notification that went out about our statement regarding all of the things that have happened with collective bargaining. And while I can't say much, I just want to say that we are committed to, or I know that we are committed to, and I don't mean to speak on behalf of the board, but I know that we are committed to continuing to support all educators and all support staff. And I hope that we continue to build that relationship with the CEA and rebuild trust and just do our part as a board to make sure that we're engaging thoughtfully and in a way that's productive. So I hope that we continue to do that. And lastly, I'll just say to the graduates, congratulations. I know we've said it all night. Some people may not have another graduation in their lifetime. So to the students who had all the cords and all the honors and the students who didn't, like you all did it. And I hope that we as a community continue to amplify that as an achievement. It's important. And regardless of whatever your next steps are, you did something so important. And I hope you're proud of that. And I hope that we continue to do the work and push all students forward to be where they need to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer.
I will repeat congratulations to all those graduates. I will say attending the completer ceremony for K-Tech the other day was special again to see. I think a lot of the trades and technical expertise that our students are getting and important to, again, serving our community. And I don't want to forget all those. I want to appreciate this conversation this afternoon or this evening, colleagues. I thought it was very constructive. I appreciate your indulging me with how many questions I might ask sometimes. Staff, very good job of preparing. Writing these policies or regulations or what do we want to call them, the policies is not easy, and I know a lot of work goes into that. And as we think through them though, and again, and we go down a lot of different, I won't say rabbit holes, but different scenarios and want to understand them. And I think that's important. I appreciate you working with us on that. I did want to also highlight, I think we were recognized either late last week or earlier this week by some university studies about our reading results. And again, I think Dr. Gurley, this goes to some of the comments you've been making and again, data we're seeing around our students are recovering from COVID. And as a division, we are, I think as you and the staff are doing a great job of I think, getting better results and getting, especially those younger grades. So please keep up the good work. I hope people see that and saw that. I hope people paid attention today or this evening about our ed tech discussion here. And I think it'll be important. That's why I mentioned let's very communicate. I think some of these changes we want to make and implement next year will be leading, I think, in this state, and people will be continuing to look at us and see how we're implementing. So want to leave us with that. Look forward to further conversations with you colleagues here in the next couple of weeks. But again, I really do appreciate all the thoughtful conversations we had and thoughts and questions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Yep. Congratulations to everybody. Yeah, as hard as everything might feel day to day throughout the year, yes, watching those students walk across and seeing those smiles is worth it all. So really grateful to be part of that. Congratulations to you, sir, your staff. Thank you to the teachers and the families for supporting those students and for everything and getting us to this point. Thank you to all of you here tonight, the questions, the dialogue, the different perspectives. And thank you to all of you for your patience with all of us as we continue to grow. So much gratitude to you all, and that is it for my comment. Ms. Swift, you have a list for all of the meetings where you're kind of like, I don't have anything.
I know. So I have notes, but just the feedback regarding targeted supports for the vaping drugs, so that policy JFCH. And then I will send a list of the divisions of the retention policies that we reviewed along with the cited research that we use for our policy.
You know, we at one point had that spreadsheet. You have it.
We still do.
Is it shared with us?
It should be.
Okay. I don't know if
we
you
can-
can
we can
maybe
do
reshare that,
sharing.
just in case there's thoughts that we might have to add or supplement to what her list was. But I don't know, I used to appreciate looking at that and as things were
I
crossed
just
off.
add a new tab every year. so
Yeah,
we can
yeah,
keep track.
thank you. Upcoming meetings, as Ms. Burns said, we do have a school board work session regarding board governance and development. That's on June 1st, 4 o'clock at K-Tech. Everybody, K-Tech, 4 o'clock on June 1st. And then June 4th is our next regular school board meeting, 6 p.m. here in the media center. We didn't have it on here, but Dr. Gurley, do you have any comments that you'd like to close with, or you good, sir?
No, ma'am. We are almost at the finish line, and I just want to. I shared with some school board members last night, but our unsung heroes, our communications team. If you ever need any joy, anything positive, our social media is rocking it out. And I mean, every facet of our school system is being showcased. And I know that we had some board members who that was a passion project. And I hope we are exceeding expectations in that box because our hearts are warmed daily with our social media. Yep. Have a good one.